Chapter 1. The scene began in an ancient corridor, lined with closed doors and weighed down by silence, until the stillness was shattered by a deafening sound that echoed like an explosion. Out of the shadows emerged a heavily armored warrior, struck by a crushing blow that hurled him violently to the ground. Behind him, Gilroshan, often called Sean, sprinted desperately. His glasses slipped slightly down his nose as he tried to avoid the fierce strike from the towering warrior pursuing him. He froze for a brief moment, trembling as fear clutched at him, confused as to how he had ended up in such a nightmarish place. Without warning, a monstrous figure resembling a dragon materialized in front of him, its sudden and ferocious attack forcing his thoughts into chaos. Fragments of memory flickered before Sean's eyes. He recalled moments when he had faced horrifying creatures, a sea beast rising out of dark waters, the wings of a dragon spreading over him, and the strange exhilaration of once riding such a beast during an unusual adventure. His recollections ended abruptly with the crushing memory of a giant warrior defeating him in a single strike, throwing him helplessly to the ground. The beast loomed over him now, its face twisted with rage as it advanced with murderous intent. Sean stared into its gaze, bewildered by the absurdity of his circumstances. He had once been nothing more than a 30-year-old unemployed man, drifting aimlessly through life, and now he found himself confronting a nightmare beyond reason. He asked himself again and again what fate had dragged him into such terror. Just before the monster could strike, he was pulled back by rescuers. A man and a woman appeared behind him, calling out to him with urgency and trying to awaken him. The man addressed him as Highness, while the woman urgently asked about someone named Head. Sean could not respond. His mind was locked in turmoil, seeking clarity in the storm of confusion that consumed him. Amidst the disarray, an image appeared. It was a card, radiating significance, portraying the figure of the former supreme mage, a powerful existence of legend. The appearance of the card seemed to whisper that destiny had prepared something extraordinary for Sean. He recognized that escape was no longer possible. Whatever lay ahead, he had to confront it directly. His thoughts shifted back to his previous life, to the cramped apartment where he had once sat before a computer surrounded by empty soda bottles and piles of disorder. In those days, he had stared blankly at a screen when a peculiar message appeared. It came from someone describing their pain and misery in life. Sean had frowned, questioning when people began writing such things so openly. Half in sarcasm and half in dream, he entertained the absurd possibility that what he was reading might be true, and for a moment he smiled at the fantasy. He leaned back in his chair and imagined what a second life might hold. His own existence had been depressingly ordinary. Raised in an orphanage without parents, he had worked in a factory after leaving, later drifting through part-time jobs while preparing for civil service exams. Now 30 years old, his routine felt lifeless, his joys limited to the game he had mastered, where his reputation as an expert warrior stood unmatched. That game had been his only escape, the one place where he felt control. His apartment contained little beyond the essentials, yet it was his entire world. In those moments, he asked himself if things would have been different had there been a guide through life, someone to show him the way. His attention was caught by an advertisement on the screen, calling for participants in something called a second life journey. Both curiosity and amusement stirred in him, and he began to respond to it. Warnings appeared, cautioning that the experience would not be easy, but he pressed on regardless. As he typed, doubt filled him. He wondered whether it was better to stop, since the interaction seemed unnervingly serious. Yet, after moments of hesitation, he pressed the enter key, convincing himself that even a strange diversion was preferable to his bleak reality. The response was disappointing, lacking in thrill or substance, and he mocked himself for falling for something so trivial. His disappointment turned to shock when the words nonsense appeared again and again, unsettling him deeply. His fear rose sharply when another message declared that this time they would see if he could survive. Panic gripped him as the screen glowed. Suddenly, his body began to dissolve into nothingness. He screamed in terror as his form vanished from his apartment, leaving behind only silence and the headset resting on his desk. When he regained awareness, he found himself restrained in a dark place, his voice hoarse as he demanded to know why he was there. His thoughts leapt to fears of organ trafficking, desperate to make sense of his capture. Men in masks surrounded him. One coldly informed him that he was the third prince of the Valt Empire. The name Gilroshan Elra de Valt was spoken aloud with certainty, though to Sean it felt alien and impossible. They removed his gag, commanding him to lift his head. One captor studied his features intently, nodding in satisfaction that his face matched their expectations. Sean's heart sank as he realized this mirrored the assassination scene of the third prince from the game he had played countless times. It dawned on him with frightening clarity that he was now living inside that very game. The captors declared he would be executed in the name of the Republic, his head delivered to the Emperor. Sean tried desperately to protest, to explain the mistake, but the men ignored him. The blade pressed against his neck, drawing blood, and their threats silenced him. They acknowledged that killing a prince would ignite the wrath of the Emperor, yet they remained resolute. Sean's terror deepened. He knew the fate of this character. Gilroshan was a disgraced prince, infamous for laziness and cruelty, discarded from succession and fated to die early in the story. In the game, Gilroshan had never mattered more than as a disposable figure. Now Sean had become that very character. He wondered, if he was the non-playable character, then who was the player guiding the story? One captor asked if he had final words. Trembling, Sean insisted he was not the prince they believed him to be. His pleas were met with mockery. They pointed to his red eyes and strong build as proof of his identity and warned him not to waste their time with lies. The executioner raised his sword, declaring there was no personal malice and promising a swift death. Sean's heart pounded. He told himself he could not die like this, not without understanding why fate had brought him here. Then he realized he felt no pain, even with the blade hovering so close. Time froze. Before him appeared a notification. The game had begun. Another message followed, stating that a player would now control the character Gilroshan Elra Devalt. Relief and joy surged through Sean. He was not dead. If a player now guided him, he might still live. More notifications appeared, outlining rewards. 3 points to improve his attributes, 2 points for skills, and a quest titled Escape the Crisis. He understood that just as in the game, he had only a short window to choose actions before time resumed. Fateful cards materialized, glowing in front of him. They promised unique abilities, rare equipment, storylines, and personal growth. From a set of 1024, he was allowed to select only one. The choice would determine whether he lived or died. Sean steadied himself. His future, and perhaps his only chance, rested on a single card. Lights blazed around him in dazzling brilliance, heightening the tension of the moment. He felt the restraints around him, his body trembling, yet curiosity pushed him forward. With a breath drawn deep, Sean prepared to choose. His hands shook, but his mind whispered that there was no turning back. Whatever the result, it would define his fate. Chapter 2. Gilroshan suddenly remembered a special rule that only expert players of this abandoned world would know. It was a rule that guaranteed at least one close combat card at the beginning of the game, designed to make the start slightly more manageable. He also recalled that the average rank of the 3 initial cards was supposed to be. With that in mind, he aimed to select something balanced, perhaps a defensive card, not one that was overwhelmingly strong. Resolute, he pressed his finger on one of the cards. To his dismay, the card that appeared bore the rank of F and was titled Slave Gladiator. Shocked and disappointed, Gilroshan struggled to contain his frustration. Still unwilling to give up, he tried again, hoping the second draw would be kinder. The next card, however, turned out to be a D rank called Third-Rate Actor. His sense of despair grew heavier. Looking at the 2 cards he had drawn, he realized that for the average to balance out at rank B, the final card would need to be exceptionally high, something almost impossible. Yet, clinging to faint hope, he reached for the last card with cautious anticipation. A weak smile spread across his face as he imagined the unlikely possibility of drawing a legendary S rank. The moment his choice was made, blinding lights flared and colors burst around him. Gilroshan stared in awe as the impossible unfolded before his eyes. Against all odds, he had drawn a transcendent rank card, one known as the Supreme Mage. He could hardly comprehend it, as this was something no player would expect even in the wildest dreams. He recalled what he knew of the Supreme Mage card. It was renowned as the strongest of all, with unmatched offensive potential capable of dominating battlefields from afar. The thought of acquiring it so early unsettled him, and suspicion gnawed at his mind. Then a startling realization struck him. Perhaps it was because he was not playing as a traditional player character. Being a non-playable character might have tilted the rules in his favor. The awareness deepened when he looked at his reflection. His body was not his own but that of Gilroshan Valt, the third prince of the empire. This was no ordinary role. The imperial family of Gilroshan's lineage was famed in ancient tales for overwhelming magical prowess, and the identity he had inherited carried both danger and opportunity. Gathering his thoughts, Gilroshan examined the cards again. The Supreme Mage seemed like salvation, yet he hesitated. Despite its overwhelming potential, he doubted whether it could help him in this immediate crisis. Cards provided perks such as stats, skills, gear, and narrative backdrops, but right now survival depended only on skills. Among the Supreme Mage's gifts was superior spatial control, a defensive technique against magical threats. However, it required access to mana circuits around the heart. That would not serve him at this moment. His instincts as a veteran player told him to let go of the luxurious option. To pick the Supreme Mage now could mean instant death, and death in this reality would not allow another chance. Irony weighed on him as he stood on the brink of execution with the most powerful card in existence before him. Yet survival demanded a bitter choice. With grim determination, he chose the Slave Gladiator card, the weakest option possible. He mocked himself inwardly for the decision but silently promised the legendary card that he would return to claim it one day. The Slave Gladiator activated at once, granting him 3 unique skills that would trigger in 5 seconds. Gilroshan felt anger and confusion at the mocking names of the abilities. Taste of Masochism dulled physical pain and boosted recovery. Taste of Sadism increased movement speed temporarily. Taste of Servitude allowed him to survive 1 fatal blow. They were undeniably weak, and yet he clung to them, for they were all he had. The battle resumed abruptly, forcing him into action. His attacker struck, driving him to the ground with a brutal blow. Pain coursed through him, yet to his surprise, he did not die. His survival shocked even himself. The skill had triggered instinctively, saving his life but leaving a deep wound on his neck. The assassins who had attacked him, believing him dead, regrouped only to find him alive. The status window confirmed that 1 skill had been consumed and could not be used again for a full day. Gilroshan's enemies, led by Vamiyo di Marco, were stunned. Gathering what strength he could, Gilroshan called out the leader's name, accusing him of betrayal. The sharp tone and knowledge of Vamilo's identity shocked everyone present. Vamiyo demanded to know how Gilroshan could possibly know his real name, but Gilroshan pressed forward boldly. He claimed he was not merely the prince but someone greater. To the astonishment of all, he declared himself to be Eolim, the Lord of Vengeance. The assassins, who also served as priests of Eolim, wavered in disbelief. Gilroshan pushed harder, shouting with authority that the god himself had descended into this body. His fury, confidence, and reckless daring convinced many of them. They recalled that Eolim was one of the 12 abandoned lords who loved meddling in human affairs. His arrogance matched their expectations of the deity. Vamiyo sought proof, asking for a blessing. Gilroshan responded with outrage, reminding them of the false idol they once presented, gold-plated instead of pure. His fury shook them, and their resistance crumbled. One after another, they submitted, kneeling before him and begging forgiveness. Despite this victory, Gilroshan noted that Vamilo's eyes still carried suspicion. To further solidify his ruse, he proclaimed that Prince Gilroshan Valt had been chosen as Eolim's personal messenger and demanded that no harm come to him. This declaration unsettled Vamiyo, who had planned to exploit the prince. Gilroshan then insisted that the prince would join the revolutionary army and must be treated with respect. Though Vamiyo outwardly complied, Gilroshan understood that the leader's loyalty was thin and laced with doubt. Pressing his advantage, Gilroshan ordered the group to escort him to Orex, the western capital of the revolutionary army. His demand surprised them, for Orex was hostile ground for an imperial prince. Yet Gilroshan knew from his knowledge of the storyline that Orex was a place where information equaled power, and he could thrive there. With his authority established, he commanded the group forward. Internally, he vowed to turn the weak and despised prince into a figure of legend. If deception and cunning were the only tools at his disposal, then he would wield them without hesitation. Smiling inwardly, Gilroshan resolved to climb to the very top, deceiving all who stood in his path. Chapter 3. As evening settled, the group gathered around the campfire while sparks drifted quietly into the darkening sky. The atmosphere was calm until several members began offering Gilroshan different dishes they had prepared. Each competed to gain his attention, urging him to eat their food and hoping for his approval. Gilroshan felt overwhelmed by the pile of meals placed before him and made it clear that he was trying to lose weight, insisting that he could not eat everything. The others remained persistent. They reminded him that Lord Eolim had commanded them to take proper care of him, warning that if he refused, the Lord would be displeased with them. Their earnest eyes made Gilroshan uneasy, for they appeared less like assassins and more like young men and women eager to please him. Despite their persistence, he resisted with visible difficulty. He admitted that he desired the food but had to endure for the sake of his goals. One of them tried to convince him that a small portion would not matter, while others reassured him that his body was fine as it was. Gilroshan accused them of lying, silently comparing the situation to a form of torture. At that moment, Vamiyo, their leader, appeared and reprimanded them harshly for neglecting their duties. They had failed to assign guards while resting in dangerous imperial territory. He ordered them to regain their vigilance, and they obeyed immediately. After restoring order, Vamiyo addressed Gilroshan directly, explaining that the group's insistence came from genuine trust in him. Gilroshan accepted this with understanding. However, when one of the group playfully pretended to offer him bird meat only to pull it away, he grew annoyed at the childish joke. Vamiyo then observed aloud that the prince had lost a noticeable amount of weight in just 3 days. Gilroshan himself was surprised, almost as if the illustrator of the tale had changed his figure abruptly. Vamiyo sat beside him and expressed admiration, explaining that in all his life, he had never seen someone endure the hardships that Gilroshan had. Gilroshan smiled faintly, noting that he understood what Vamiyo had thought from the beginning. The leader had been worried about whether they could escape imperial lands with the prince in such a fragile state. Gilroshan remembered well how his body had collapsed again and again, refusing to withstand the strain of the journey. In one such moment of collapse, when despair began creeping into him, a status window appeared before his eyes. The numbers shocked him. His stamina was only 9, a pitiful value compared to the typical range of 40 to 60. He was practically closer to a corpse than a healthy human. Realizing the truth, Gilroshan knew he needed to raise his stamina and lose weight quickly if he wished to continue the journey. Meanwhile, Vamiyo and the others worried greatly about his declining condition. They debated using a healing potion but hesitated, bound by Lord Eolam's instructions. Gilroshan himself rejected the idea internally. He did not want to burden them further. Sorrow and frustration overwhelmed him as he struck the ground in despair. Yet, despite his trembling body, he forced himself to rise, his face pale with exhaustion. He firmly declared that no potions should be used on him, asking them instead to continue marching. Activating one of his unique skills, masochistic inclination, Gilroshan endured the strain as his mind and body recovered for a short span. He pressed forward, choosing pain over dependency. He realized that with rigorous training, his stamina could be raised rapidly, so he resolved never to give up, never to weigh the group down. Watching this, the others were stunned. They began to reconsider their impression of him, seeing not weakness but resilience. Through relentless effort, Gilroshan increased his stamina to 37. He felt a measure of satisfaction but knew the road remained long. That evening, he sat with Pomelo, who explained that by the next day they would reach the magic gate and from their travel toward Orex. However, Vamiyo revealed troubling news. Their original mission had been to kill Gilroshan, not escort him back alive. None had expected him to become Lord Eolam's messenger. Gilroshan surprised him further by continuing the explanation. He revealed that a traitor inside the palace had been working with them. They had been meant to return with his corpse as proof of success. Since they had failed, the traitor would likely realize their failure and act against them. Vamiyo admitted that their identities were known and their route predictable. Thus, the gate was likely already sealed. Their situation was perilous, with the possibility of being surrounded from both sides. Astonished by Gilroshan's deduction, Vamiyo asked if he knew who the traitor was. With confidence, Gilroshan identified Viscount Zarek Moss, the Imperial Court Affairs Minister. Shocked, Vamiyo asked why he believed so. Gilroshan considered carefully. This was not merely a question but a test. He needed to prove his intelligence convincingly. He recalled that Zarek Moss originated from the Khan tribe, a people with a history of conflict with the Empire. The tribe was closely tied to the Revolutionary Army, making Moss's cooperation logical. Furthermore, Gilroshan explained that the minister had married his daughter to a noble from the borderlands, regions rife with skirmishes between Empire and revolutionaries. Such a marriage likely aimed to strengthen ties with the Revolutionary Army. He added that the noble was likely a follower of Lord Eolam, linking Moss directly to the upper church. Vamiyo was left impressed, marveling at the insight of the prince once dismissed as incompetent. Gilroshan, however, knew the admiration was directed at the character he now played, not his true self. Reflecting, Gilroshan realized events had diverged sharply from the original story, where the third prince was supposed to die. Minister Moss would now use his strongest piece, Marquis Elon Loit, commander of the Royal Knights. Vamiyo pressed that they must move swiftly to escape the ambush. Yet Gilroshan countered that speed alone would not save them. They required a new route, one absent from the original game. Vamiyo explained that Lord Eolam had tasked them with Gilroshan's safety. Gilroshan then suggested they wait here. Confused, Vamiyo asked why, only to realize his intent when a cloaked figure appeared. The man studied them with sarcasm, accusing them of waiting for the bear and the nightingale. The figure stepped forward, masked and armed, and demanded to know whether Gilroshan expected his personal guards. Gilroshan grew wary of the stranger's threats as the man pointed a sword at him. He calculated quickly, recognizing the man's lack of patience. With a bold smile, he demanded the stranger's name, refusing to answer questions otherwise. This enraged the man, whose temper flared beyond what Gilroshan had anticipated. Gilroshan adjusted his approach and offered two truths. First, he had no intention of returning to the imperial palace. Second, he admitted to waiting for the bear and the nightingale, though he saw no reason to trust the stranger with further details. The man grew furious, pressing his threats. Yet Gilroshan suddenly caught a floral scent around him, a detail that surprised him greatly. Vamiyo then intervened and introduced the figure as Urgel, a mercenary ally of the revolutionary forces. Gilroshan considered this carefully, realizing it fit. In the game's world, player characters often operated as free mercenaries rather than fixed members of factions. It even crossed his mind that Urgel might be a player like himself. Still demanding answers, Urgel asked again why Gilroshan waited for the bear and the nightingale. Gilroshan recalled that those names referred to two figures, Karl Cillian, a 6-star knight sworn as the prince's shadow, and Turvan Sway, a 7-star sorceress who served as his mentor. Urgel pressed him further, but before Gilroshan could answer, one priest interrupted, urging Vamiyo to kill the prince quickly before time was lost. Urgel ignored the priest and spoke the name of Marquis Elon Loit, instantly drawing everyone's attention. Gilroshan asked Vamiyo and Urgel whether they knew this man. Vamiyo confirmed he was one of the Empire's 3 great swordmasters. Gilroshan then asked bluntly whether either of them could defeat him. Silence followed, and he mocked them, saying that walking straight into battle would mean certain death. He declared that those who wished to die should go alone, rather than drag the group into ruin. Marquis Elon Loit was a 9-star master of the sword, one of the most powerful figures on the continent, a warrior capable of erasing his enemies with ease. Urgel remarked with biting sarcasm that perhaps facing such a man would be a fine way to vanish completely, leaving not even ashes behind. Chapter 4. Gilroshan's warning about Marquis Elon Loit weighed heavily on Urgel, who fully grasped its meaning. He understood that confronting the Marquis would be nothing short of walking toward certain death. Gilroshan, however, observed something unexpected. Urgel accepted this truth without argument, avoiding needless debate. It confirmed to Gilroshan that Urgel was far from thoughtless, despite his earlier impression. Vamiyo then raised a pressing question. He asked what plan Gilroshan had in mind if the city gate truly was blocked by the Knights of Marquis Elon. He reminded the group that the arrival of the warrior known as the bear and the sorceress called the nightingale might not be sufficient to break through. Gilroshan noticed Urgel's silence during this exchange, suspecting that the man might already know more than he was letting on. Confidently stepping forward, Gilroshan declared that there was indeed a way to survive and enter the city of Orex safely. He assured them that if they followed his instructions precisely, they would reach their destination. Before unveiling his plan, he asked Vamiyo to grant him 2 promises. The first was absolute secrecy regarding what he was about to reveal, swearing by Lord Eolam's name. Vamiyo solemnly agreed, binding himself to the promise no matter the cost. The second request was simpler. Gilroshan asked that once they reached Orex safely, Vamiyo brought him a particular item. Surprised, Vamiyo asked what it could possibly be. Gilroshan answered calmly, requesting only an ordinary pair of glasses, something easily found in Orex. With the promise secured, he began to disclose a vital secret. Gilroshan revealed that the warrior known as the bear was actually Karl Loit, widely feared as the Knight of Dawn and, most importantly, the illegitimate son of Marquis Elon Loit. Vamiyo was stunned by this revelation, unable to process the connection. Gilroshan explained that this truth was known only to a select few and that even Karl himself remained unaware of his true origin. He then glanced at Urgel, who showed no sign of surprise. This convinced Gilroshan further that Urgel was no ordinary man. The manner in which Urgel carried himself and his calmness suggested he was a real player who understood the deeper lore of the world, perhaps even realizing that this world was part of a grand game. After all, the third prince had not died when he was supposed to in the original storyline. Suddenly, a massive explosion ripped through the silence. A booming voice roared, calling for the prince. Carls arrived with Turvan Sway, the formidable sorceress known as the Nightingale, both searching for Gilroshan. Carls charged at Vamilo's men, his blade flashing with deadly precision. He accused them of kidnapping the prince and demanded they return him at once if they valued their lives. The priest stood in shock, for although they had kidnapped Gilroshan, the prince now traveled willingly with them. As the clash erupted, Gilroshan sprinted toward the battlefield. He had left subtle markers along their path, specifically designed to guide Carls to their location. However, he understood the danger Sway posed. If she unleashed her full strength, the conflict would escalate into a slaughter. At that moment, Sway appeared in a storm of magical fire, her presence overwhelming the priests. Her voice thundered with rage as she demanded to know Gilroshan's whereabouts. When a priest tried to plead with her to wait, she grew furious, threatening to burn them to ash and search for her student herself. In that dire instant, Gilroshan emerged, shouting for his mentor to stop. Both Carls and Sway froze at the sight of him. The frail, exhausted figure that stumbled toward them seemed unbelievable, yet there was no mistaking the presence of Prince Gilroshan. Breathing heavily, he smiled in relief as Carls's fury ignited. The knight turned his wrath upon the priests, demanding an explanation for the prince's condition. The priests, bewildered, exchanged uncertain glances. They had not harmed him, yet the prince's state suggested otherwise. Gilroshan stepped forward, explaining that he was no longer kidnapped. He declared that he now chose to follow the group of his own free will. Carls could not comprehend such words, while Sway erupted in anger. She had endured countless hardships to rescue him, only to hear him claim allegiance to those who had taken him. Her fury threatened to tear the ground apart with magic. Gilroshan reflected bitterly on how violent and unreasonable his mentor could be. He remembered the rumors surrounding her, that the red shadow raised in the Tower of Five Colors was not a young prodigy but rather a witch over 2 centuries old, despite appearing no older than 19. Her reputation painted her as one of the most dangerous mages of the Empire, yet her behavior seemed more akin to a thug than a dignified sorceress. Carls intervened before her temper escalated further. His calm presence softened her instantly, for Sway was famously weak before handsome men, especially Carls. With the moment settled, Gilroshan declared his decision. He would go to Orex. Carls was horrified. To him, Orex represented the stronghold of the Revolutionary Army, the fiercest enemy of the Empire. The decision appeared suicidal. Gilroshan, however, explained with newfound calm and conviction that his choice was not the careless whim of a foolish prince. He admitted his past was frivolous, yet he emphasized that this path was one he had chosen consciously, a path to survival and to destiny. He asked Carls not to hinder him, stressing that this was his lord's order. Turning to Sway, he asked forgiveness for his past failures as her student. He confessed that he had never abandoned magic but had simply not found the right moment to embrace it. Now, he promised he would one day reach the brilliance of the 5 colors she had once taught him about. Sway was astonished. Never before had Gilroshan even looked her in the eye, let alone spoken with such authority. More importantly, he recited a secret phrase known only within the Tower of 5 Colors, a phrase so obscure that even many mages of the era had never heard it. She was overwhelmed, realizing that she had failed to see his potential over the past 5 years. Her heart filled with regret as she reflected on how poorly she had guided him. Gilroshan then requested that both Carls and Sway accompany him to Orex. Sway agreed instantly, surprising him. She explained that a teacher must trust a student who shows true awareness and resolve. With a hint of humor, she teased that perhaps one day he would elevate her to the head of the Tower of 5 Colors. Carls, on the other hand, was torn. His loyalty to the Empire clashed with the prince's perilous decision. His face betrayed deep turmoil. Yet at last, Carls burst into tears, overwhelmed by the gravity of the moment. He fell to his knees before Gilroshan, pledging his loyalty. He vowed to follow his lord's path, will, and fate no matter the cost. At that instant, a system window appeared before Gilroshan, confirming that Carls and Sway had joined his party. The display left Carls slightly embarrassed but resolute. Elsewhere, Marquis Elon Loit seethed with frustration. His lieutenant reported traces of the escape, though the fugitives had hidden their tracks well. Elon's rage burned as he cursed Prince Gilroshan as useless. His thoughts shifted to Carls, his illegitimate son. He remembered how he had nearly lost the boy to enslavement under imperial law, only to save him through the Cillian family's care. Carls had been destined for greatness, yet instead of shining as a knight, he degraded himself by serving the disgraced third prince, joining him in drinking parties and scandals. To Elon, Gilroshan was the root of his son's downfall. If this ended in the prince's death, he intended to bring Karls back into the empire's knightly ranks. He asked his aide if Karls and Sway, who were also searching, might find the prince first. The aide assured him it was unlikely, since Sway's magic was unsuited for tracking. Elon smirked, claiming that fortune favored them. He ordered his lieutenant to press forward with unyielding force, ensuring that the kidnappers were annihilated and every escape route sealed, no matter the price. Chapter 5. After issuing his commands, Elon's special forces began executing them without hesitation. The intent behind these orders revealed Elon's complete disregard for the third prince's existence, showing that his sole focus was on annihilating the enemy group. He was willing to spill any amount of blood, even if it included that of the prince himself. During this time, Gilroshan was lost in thought until Karls called out his name, snapping him back to reality. Karls asked why he appeared so distracted and also questioned the reason behind him carrying a sword. Gilroshan replied that he was using it for his own purpose, though his tone carried a sharp edge. Karls noticed that the prince's expression had grown more serious than usual, a stark contrast to how he usually carried himself. Gilroshan responded sarcastically, pointing out how often he had been forced to run alongside suspicious men and remarking that it was a miracle he had not died yet. Unexpectedly, Karls remained calm and stated that despite everything, the prince had survived. This made Gilroshan quietly wonder why Karls was acting so unusually. Karls then expressed how deeply worried he had been during the chase, explaining that he had been afraid something terrible might happen to the prince. At that moment, Gilroshan remembered that in the original story, his bond with Karls had been like that of brothers. Although he himself was not the real Gilroshan, he felt genuine happiness at seeing Karls alive before him. His mind wandered briefly, recalling that Karls had been his favorite frontline attacker in the game. Known as the Knight of Dawn, Karls was an exceptional warrior who shined most brilliantly in the later stages of the story if raised properly. To Gilroshan, this reunion felt like running into an old friend from school after years apart. Sway then approached, having just awakened. She greeted them cheerfully while yawning, asking if Gilroshan had slept well. He admitted inwardly that, compared to Karls, Sway had been a more difficult character to utilize in the game, yet he still felt happiness at seeing her as a real person. Karls then invited Sway into the conversation. She immediately grew shy, flustered by his presence, and her nervousness became obvious. As the three spoke, Karls remarked that their gathering reminded him of their old days in the Palace of Boys, the academy where sons of nobles across the empire had once studied together. He spoke at length about the past, recalling when Gilroshan had been a radiant figure adored by everyone. Even the emperor himself, Karls explained, had shown great affection for him. This revelation shocked Gilroshan. Neither the original game nor the story had ever suggested that the third prince had once been loved and treated as a normal child. Karls continued, noting that Gilroshan's life would have turned out entirely differently if the empire had not idolized magic and established it as the foundation of power. Gilroshan instantly understood that this was the root of the prince's decline and eventual loss of status. Born into nobility, expectations had been high. Yet because he had no magical talent, Gilroshan had gradually lost affection and respect, enduring painful rejection. He sympathized with these memories but reminded himself that they did not belong to him, but rather to the character he now embodied. He asked Karls not to dwell excessively on the past, saying it no longer mattered. He noted that no one remembered the third prince as he once had been, except Karls alone. He suggested they focus only on the present, and Karls quickly agreed. Gilroshan felt relief at this, admitting that he was glad people no longer easily recognized him. His confidence surged as he resolved to become the most knowledgeable person in navigating this world, unwilling to remain a useless figure. Though he lacked magical power and had drawn a low-tier gladiator card rather than a legendary mage card, he refused to surrender. He believed chances remained before him. Turning toward Karls, Gilroshan declared firmly that he would fight to survive and return, and that when he finally returned to the Empire, no one would dare to ignore him again, whether as a friend, a brother, or as a master. Karls seemed surprised at such conviction, yet Gilroshan cheerfully told him to stand tall with pride. This embarrassed Karls, who tried to mask his reaction. Gilroshan then spoke of his plans. He explained that he would not return to the imperial palace because it was filled with traitors. Carls listened attentively as Gilroshan identified Marquis Elon Loit, commander of the northern capital, as a major threat. Carls was shocked and at first refused to believe that the Marquis could be tied to treachery. Gilroshan clarified that he did not believe Elon was a traitor, but that he opposed them for now and would attempt to destroy their group while dragging the prince back to the palace. Carls then asked anxiously whether Gilroshan intended to persuade Elon as he had persuaded both him and Sway. Gilroshan expressed doubt, wondering if Elon could ever be swayed. Carls admitted with sorrow that persuasion seemed unlikely. He explained that the revolutionary priest would be crushed and the prince would be dragged back with no chance of escape. Gilroshan reassured him that he was not discouraged and confirmed that he had already prepared another plan. Both Carls and Sway grew eager to hear this plan. Gilroshan gripped his sword and declared calmly that the solution was simple. He would challenge the Marquis and defeat him to pass safely into Orex. Carls and Sway were shocked, their expressions filled with disbelief. Carls demanded to know if Gilroshan had gone mad, warning that the Marquis was a superhuman warrior. Gilroshan dismissed their impatience irritably, insisting that he was not sick. Carls grew angry, questioning how they could hope to confront such a man. Sway smirked and remarked sarcastically that she wished Gilroshan had shown this much interest in magic earlier. At that moment, Gilroshan felt ignored. Yet he reminded himself that this world, known as the one forsaken by the lady, had rules that were not dictated by raw power alone. Strategy, traps, and psychological tactics could allow a weaker opponent to defeat even a stronger foe. Sway then pressed him directly, asking how he intended to deal with Elon. Gilroshan answered with confidence that he would propose an official noble duel. Carls snapped in disbelief, insisting that it was impossible. Gilroshan explained the rules of such duels. A one-on-one fight, governed by noble customs, held under mutually agreed terms, and requiring a neutral witness. He nominated Carls for the role of witness. Carls resisted, claiming Elon would never accept unfair terms. Gilroshan then presented his 3 conditions. First, swords only. Second, dropping a sword meant instant defeat. Third, no armor. Carls reacted with fury, declaring the conditions suicidal. He explained that swords only favored Elon, the Empire's greatest swordsman. The second rule put the weaker fighter at a disadvantage. The third endangered Gilroshan's life. Carls refused to witness such recklessness. Gilroshan tried to calm him, assuring that he would not be in danger. Carls pressed further, asking how he could be so certain. Gilroshan reasoned that a professional duelist like Elon would not take a beginner seriously. He would restrain himself to avoid serious injury. Carls admitted that this reasoning made sense, noting that the no-armor rule would indeed force Elon to hold back. Gilroshan continued confidently, insisting that even if Elon despised him, he would not be killed. Privately, he thought that Carls's presence as witness would restrain Elon further, since he would not dare harm a prince in front of his beloved son. Carls then asked in confusion why Elon hated Gilroshan. The prince hesitated, unwilling to reveal the truth that Elon sought to secure his son's future. He merely answered that there was a misunderstanding. Sway then noted that the priests from the church had been absent all day. Gilroshan responded with a faint smile, saying he had made a small request of them. Elsewhere, the priests quarreled over strange goblins they had captured. Some argued it was cheating, while others wondered about the humans captured by those creatures. In a nearby dark room, terrified villagers awaited salvation until a blinding light revealed the high priest. The high priest explained that the rescued villagers had been returned by the will of Lord Eolam and confirmed that preparations were nearly complete. He ordered a young follower to summon Gilroshan. The priests began arguing over who should go, but the high priest silenced them sternly, warning against emotional attachment to a prince of an enemy nation. He reminded them that Gilroshan was merely a candidate for the role of messenger until confirmation arrived. The chosen young man departed to summon Gilroshan, privately determined to learn more about his plan. The other priests wondered why he had been brought along at all, but the high priest simply ordered cooperation with him for the time being. Chapter 6. Gilroshan stood with his sword in hand and urged his companions to move while they spoke. He explained that the nearby goblin villages should already be dealt with, since he had ordered the priest to clear them. To him, the process resembled a leveling phase in a game, though his words left Carls and Sway exchanging puzzled looks. They did not fully understand what he meant, yet Gilroshan continued with an easy confidence, explaining that he personally needed to complete the final part of the mission in the damp goblin village ahead. This village was known to be home to hardened veteran goblins and was considered unsuitable for beginners. The 3 companions began their journey toward the village. As they walked, Gilroshan shifted the conversation to Marquis Elon Loit. He spoke with certainty, claiming to know the man's true weakness. Carls quickly interrupted, insisting he already knew it as well. According to him, the Marquis struggled to synchronize mana with his swordsmanship. Sui joined in, mentioning that she too had heard the Marquis' mana efficiency was poor. Gilroshan dismissed these minor flaws. He explained that compared to other swordmasters, such issues were insignificant. What truly mattered was a more severe problem, a near paralysis in the Marquis' right shoulder. Gilroshan recalled that this particular detail had been established in the game, hidden from most but critical to understanding the man's limitations. Sui expressed surprise, admitting it was the first time she had heard of such a weakness. Carls hesitated before asking where Gilroshan had gained this knowledge. Gilroshan pretended to think, then claimed he had overheard the Emperor discussing it with the commander of the Royal Knights. Carls accepted the explanation with caution, reasoning that if it were true, the Marquis would be unable to use the Vanguard blade style, a technique that demanded the strength of both arms. Gilroshan confirmed the deduction, elaborating that the Vanguard blade was an S-rank technique unique to the Loit family. Its signature move, Twin Severance, boosted damage by 20% when executed. The style had elevated Marquis Elon to the rank of a 9-star swordsman, making him both legendary and fearsome. Sui reflected on the possibility that the Marquis might no longer wield his most powerful technique, remarking that it could open the path to defeat him. Carls, however, reminded them that even without both arms, the Marquis remained deadly. His skill as a lone fighter was still equivalent to a 7-star warrior, a level Gilroshan could not yet dream of reaching. Gilroshan accepted Carl's caution, though he added with quiet determination that he already knew the precise one-handed style the Marquis would use. Both Carls and Sui regarded him with astonishment, realizing the depth of his preparation. Gilroshan continued, explaining that swordsmanship was built upon the balance between techniques and fighting styles. Even modest skills could become dangerous when applied with the right synergy. He believed there was still a chance, however slim, to make the Marquis drop his sword. At that moment, a figure stepped silently from between the trees. The stranger's sudden appearance made Gilroshan halt mid-sentence. The man approached slowly, scrutinizing Gilroshan with sharp eyes, and demanded to know whether he truly had the strength to face the Marquis or if he was far too weak. He leaned closer, repeating the question, pressing Gilroshan for an answer. Gilroshan admitted calmly that he could not yet block the Marquis' attacks. However, he declared his intention to claim a power zone, a temporary surge of physical strength, by defeating a mighty creature of the Rockman Mountains. The stranger instantly understood his meaning, recognizing the near-impossible task of facing the Mountain King alone. Gilroshan nevertheless insisted he knew the risks and was prepared to carry them out. He trusted that help would come if he proved himself worthy. Soon afterward, Gilroshan encountered a goblin that screamed in hatred toward humans, warning him not to come closer. Realizing that these creatures were real and no longer bound by game rules, he struck first, killing the goblin with a clean blow. The moment it fell, he felt his body grow stronger. He had leveled up and gained a skill point. Opening his skill window, he saw that with his saved points he now had 3. He invested them in vagabond martial arts, gaining strength and endurance. He knew, however, that to learn the skill capable of countering Marquis Elon, he needed to reach at least level 9. Standing only at level 1, the journey seemed impossibly long. Gilroshan pressed forward, cutting through goblins relentlessly. His levels rose faster than he expected. With more points, he learned extreme training, a skill that improved his reaction in critical moments while slightly enhancing intelligence. By the time he rejoined Carls and Sui, his presence carried a new weight. Sui noticed the difference immediately and teased him, asking if he had sneaked off to enjoy some meal without sharing. Gilroshan smiled, saying lightly that he had eaten something prepared by the priests. Sui's mood shifted instantly to outrage. She accused him of being greedy and inconsiderate, ranting at him with youthful fire. Gilroshan found her reaction amusing, quietly reminding himself that she was still only 19. The high priest approached calmly and asked what the next step would be. Gilroshan replied that there were still goblins nearby and requested that the priest lure a few toward him so he could practice further without draining himself. With his mindset, he prepared to engage directly in combat, determined to refine his control of the sword. Soon Carl shouted a warning, announcing the goblins were approaching faster than expected. To Gilroshan's surprise, their numbers were far greater than anticipated. Sui immediately unleashed a surge of fire, promising to handle 2 of them herself. Karls urged Gilroshan to stay focused as one goblin lunged forward, snarling its intent to kill. Gilroshan moved with precision, blocking the strike. Despite its small frame, the goblin's strength shocked him, yet his swordsmanship flowed more smoothly than before, a clear sign of progress. He sensed timing markers on the goblin's movements, almost as if the game interface had returned to guide him, highlighting perfect moments to strike. Encouraged, he dispatched the creature swiftly, realizing it was easier than he had feared. He continued fighting, drawing upon his new skills. Activating the taste of pain ability, he felt his body recover rapidly, letting him fight with relentless momentum. However, after some time, Karls intervened, insisting that everyone, including the priests, was exhausted. Gilroshan finally relented and suggested they rest, celebrating the progress made that day. The priests rejoiced, praising Lord Eolam for blessing them with the strength to endure. That evening, the group gathered around a fire. One of the priests recounted tales of his encounters with orcs, filling the air with laughter and camaraderie. Gilroshan listened quietly, reflecting on the day's trials. Unbeknownst to them, a unit of Imperial Special Forces knights observed from the shadows. The captain studied Gilroshan with particular intensity. The man known as a worthless prince now carried himself with confidence, speaking and laughing alongside Karls as though he had always belonged in battle. The transformation puzzled the captain, who wondered what hidden strength Gilroshan was now revealing to the world. Chapter 7. Gilroshan's group was under quiet surveillance by Sir Pellet and his Special Operations Unit. One soldier, unable to contain his nerves, asked whether they should strike immediately. Sir Pellet, however, ordered restraint until he could properly judge the situation. His mind was unsettled by what he observed. The supposed fugitives made no effort to hide themselves. Open fires burned each night, and alcohol flowed as if they had no reason to fear pursuit. The lack of caution suggested either supreme confidence or an elaborate trap. The mission had been simple in its framing: eliminate the kidnappers and recover the prince. Yet what Sir Pellet witnessed defied all expectations. Gilroshan did not look like a hostage. He laughed freely, speaking with ease as though surrounded by comrades rather than captors. Beside him stood Karls Cillian, the distinguished knight, and Turvan Sway, the sorceress of formidable reputation. The sight only deepened the captain's confusion. If this were a trap, it was strangely transparent. Sir Pellet resolved to gain clarity before acting rashly. He ordered his soldiers to hold their position and advanced toward the group alone. When they noticed him, their expressions stiffened, wary of the sudden presence of Imperial knights. Sir Pellet greeted Gilroshan calmly, remarking on his apparent safety. Karls immediately recognized him and addressed him by name, Sir Pellet. Gilroshan's eyes narrowed, demanding to know why the captain had come. Sir Pellet's reply carried suspicion. He warned that Karls and Sway might have betrayed the Empire or allied with criminals who had abducted the prince. Gilroshan bristled at the tone, considering it deeply disrespectful to a son of the Imperial family. Karls stepped forward, anger flashing in his voice as he demanded a formal greeting for the prince before any accusations were spoken. Turvan Sway reinforced Karls's demand, standing firmly by Gilroshan's side. Their loyalty reassured him, easing the irritation that threatened to cloud his judgment. Sir Pellet found himself pressured by the situation and reluctantly bowed. He introduced himself with full titles, as captain of the Special Operations Unit and assistant to the commander, offering the salute due to the third prince of Valt. Gilroshan allowed him to rise, then instructed Karls and Sway to grant them privacy. Once alone, Gilroshan stated plainly that the priests of vengeance had not concealed their trail, a fact Pellet himself must have noticed. He explained that this apparent carelessness had been deliberate. The priests had been asked to act that way because he had been awaiting Pellet's arrival. Pellet was shocked by the confession. Gilroshan revealed he had never been kidnapped. His true aim was to travel to Orex, where he intended to meet Marquis Elon Loit. This revelation staggered Pellet, whose mind reeled at the possibility of treason. He asked directly if the prince intended to betray the Empire. Gilroshan dismissed the question with sharp sarcasm, stating that as a prince he need not explain every decision to a subordinate. He mockingly asked whether such accusations should be shouted at the Marquis's very gate. Pellet faltered, forced to concede the weight of his authority. Gilroshan pressed the advantage, ordering Pellet to accept his words and accompany him at dawn. There would be one stop along the way. When Pellet asked cautiously what that stop entailed, Gilroshan replied with a faint smile. They would hunt a monster that endangered Imperial citizens. His expression hardened as he warned Pellet against any attempt to strike at the priests of vengeance, whether by stealth or by force. Then he whispered that as a longtime servant of the Lloyd family, Pellet surely knew the secret of Karl's birth. The captain stiffened with shock, shaken that the prince carried such knowledge. Gilroshan commanded silence, insisting the night pass without incident. Pellet, unsettled and unwilling to provoke the prince further, obeyed. He returned to his men with a head filled with doubt, questioning whether this truly was the same reckless third prince whose reputation had stained the imperial court. At dawn, Gilroshan emerged clad in battle attire. He declared he would employ the Trafalgar style, a defensive dueling technique rooted in Luxon tradition, famed for chaining counterattacks and suited to any sword. Yet he knew he needed more. Recalling the Marquis's legendary blade, a weapon said to possess its own will, Gilroshan decided to expand his repertoire. He spent his skill points to acquire the nomad dominant sword style, an aggressive technique forged in the fury of Western tribes. Though classified lower than Trafalgar, its raw ferocity stirred him. Gilroshan analyzed the system of swordplay he had come to understand. Dominant sword emphasized relentless pressure, flowing sword capitalized on rapid strikes against defensive gaps, while swift sword countered with superior speed. The balance resembled the endless loop of rock, paper, and scissors. Classifications held meaning, but outcomes relied more on adaptation than rigid rank. He reflected on the nomad dominant sword's origins. The Luxon kingdom once enslaved Western nomads, yet those tribes rose in violent rebellion, nearly destroying their oppressors. Though defeated, their combat style endured. It was crafted to break enemy blades and counter the Trafalgar style itself. For Gilroshan, mastering it was more than strategy. It was a weapon of defiance. Karls and Sway joined him, confirming their readiness. The group advanced, yet tension between the priests of vengeance and Pellet's knights was unmistakable. Distrust weighed on every step. Gilroshan addressed them, insisting that continuous strikes wore enemies down more effectively than a single decisive blow. His lesson met blank stares, though they pretended to understand. From the shadows, a masked figure observed. The stranger stepped forward, declaring that the group would only listen if Gilroshan himself led. The logic was sound, and Gilroshan accepted. To solidify authority, he turned to Karls and demanded a strike. Confused, Karls hesitated, but Gilroshan insisted. Karls struck with a strong blow, catching the prince mid-sentence. Irritation flickered in Gilroshan, though he quickly masked it. Standing tall, Gilroshan announced that he would assume direct command over priests and knights alike. He warned that disobedience would doom them all, for they faced a terror greater than they imagined. Their enemy was Gromhart, the king of the Rockman Mountains. The name unsettled Pellet, who had assumed the mission was merely a hunt for a beast. Gilroshan clapped his hands sharply, ending the briefing. He ordered immediate movement, declaring that hesitation would cost them their lives. The march began with heavy steps, the weight of his authority pressing down on every heart. Chapter 8. Upon entering the cave of the Beast King, the group was met with a scene that filled them with dread. Scattered bones covered the ground, evidence of countless lives lost to the creature that dwelled within. The monstrous King Gromhart slowly stirred from his slumber, his immense body shifting as he opened his glowing eyes. A chilling voice resonated through the cave as he addressed them. He remarked that he had been wondering about the delicious scent in the air, and now the answer was clear. Fresh meat had come willingly into his den. His lips curled into a twisted smile that promised only carnage. Sir Pellet, the captain of the Special Operations Knights, felt his heart sink at the sight of the countless bones. Horror weighed heavily upon him as he asked himself how many innocents this beast had consumed. The grim reality struck him with merciless clarity. The locals had been offering sacrifices to Gromhart to appease his wrath, turning over their own people in hopes of survival. Overcome with shame, Pellet realized how blind he had been to the true scale of the tragedy. Now, the Empire was forced to rely on those who had once been branded rebels to face the abomination. His chest tightened with anger and guilt for not discovering the existence of this horror sooner. He turned toward his knights, his voice steady despite the storm within him. He declared that they would take responsibility for every life lost, and they would avenge every citizen devoured by Gromhart, even if it meant sacrificing their own lives. His knights responded without hesitation, their voices rising in unison, full of conviction. They raised their weapons and charged forward with unyielding courage. The priests of vengeance, witnessing this display of valor, felt compelled to join. To them, vengeance was sacred. They believed it was the will of their lord, Eolim, that they seek retribution. With that conviction, they followed the knights into battle. The clash erupted violently. The knights launched a coordinated assault, their blades glinting with precision as they struck at the towering beast. Yet Gromhard blocked every strike with ease, his immense strength nullifying their efforts. Sir Pellet clenched his jaw as the truth settled over him. Prince Gillian's warning had been correct. Gromhard was unlike any creature they had ever faced. Their attempts to pierce his eyes, assumed to be his weakness, were futile. None of their strikes left even the faintest mark. Pellet quickly changed tactics, ordering his men to concentrate on breaking through the beast's armor first. The knights obeyed without hesitation, adjusting their strikes to target the thick protective layer that covered Gromhard's body. The battle grew more relentless with each passing moment. From a distance, Carls observed the combat and commented to Gilroshan and Sway about the extraordinary skill of the knights. Their speed and precision, he noted, nearly rivaled that of the priests. Gilroshan calmly explained that such ability came from years of training in covert operations, where stealth and assassination techniques honed both accuracy and speed. Yet, despite their prowess, he warned that Gromhard was still in his initial phase of vulnerability. If they could gather enough force now, they might be able to bring him down. Privately, Gilroshan admitted to himself that the current battle still favored them. The true challenge had yet to reveal itself. He turned to Hervin, instructing her to prepare her magic. Hervin nodded with determination and began her incantations immediately. As the continuous strikes rained upon the monster, Gromhard grew increasingly agitated. His roars reverberated through the cavern, shaking the very walls. He bellowed in fury, calling the fighters insects and cursing them for daring to irritate him. Gilroshan's eyes narrowed. He recognized the signs of an imminent counterattack. Without hesitation, he shouted for everyone to retreat at once. A moment later, Gromhard unleashed a devastating strike that tore through the cavern, narrowly missing the retreating fighters. Sway then declared that her spell was ready. She unleashed a massive fire-based attack, engulfing the beast in a blazing explosion. The cavern shook violently from the impact. However, when the smoke cleared, Gromhard stood, more enraged than harmed. His fury intensified as he charged toward the group with terrifying speed. Sway froze in shock, unable to move as the monstrous figure barreled toward her. At the last possible moment, one of the priests of vengeance leapt into action, intercepting the beast with blinding speed and forcing it back long enough for Sway to escape. The coordinated efforts of knights and priests continued, their blades and spells striking from all angles. Though resilient, the beast's body finally began to show signs of wear. Its agonized roars filled the cavern. Gilroshan stood apart from the fray, analyzing. He acknowledged that things were progressing well so far, yet he knew this was only the beginning. The beast was about to transition into its second phase, where its resistance, speed, and regenerative power would become overwhelming. His prediction proved correct. Gromhard's body glowed with an ominous aura as his wounds closed almost instantly. Strikes that had once left faint marks now bounced off harmlessly. One of the priests, filled with alarm, turned to Gilroshan and asked whether ordinary sword strikes had become useless. He suggested using the soul of the sword to pierce such a foe. Gilroshan, calm amid the rising panic, explained his strategy. He clarified that reinforcing blades with mana would achieve little. Instead, they needed to exploit the beast's weakness to elemental magic, particularly fire. He pointed toward Turvan Sway, the 7-star sorceress, assuring everyone that her fire spells could inflict damage beyond Gromhard's capacity to regenerate. A soldier voiced concern, asking if that would not make Sway the beast's primary target. Gilroshan agreed, emphasizing that their role was to distract the monster while Sway finished her incantation. Rather than waste mana on weapon enhancement, he instructed them to focus on mobility and evasive maneuvers. His confident smile reassured them. The plan was simple but effective. The battle resumed with renewed coordination. Fire magic surged across the battlefield, striking Gromhard from every direction. Knights and priests moved swiftly, dodging and countering with precision. Amid the chaos, one soldier recklessly charged forward, declaring his bravery, only to be struck down by a crushing blow from Gromhard. Gasps filled the cavern as his body crumpled. A revolutionary fighter, wielding the sword of revolution, mocked the Imperial Knights, boasting about its unmatched power. His arrogance quickly earned him the wrath of 3 knights, who closed in with grim determination. Meanwhile, Sway concentrated on her incantations, ordering everyone to pull back so she could unleash her magic unhindered. The battle devolved into chaos. Gromhard rampaged with savage strikes, throwing soldiers aside as though they were nothing. Gilroshan felt unease gnawing at him. The tide of the battle had shifted too suddenly. He turned furiously toward Sir Pellet and the High Priest, warning them that their previous strategy was useless now. If they continued recklessly, they would all be slaughtered. At his command, the forces reluctantly began to retreat, conceding that they could not withstand the beast's power in this phase. Yet their withdrawal came too late. Gromhard unleashed another devastating attack, shaking the cavern and throwing the soldiers into disarray. Fear gripped them as the sheer force of the blow left them unable to move. In the chaos, another revolutionary fighter leapt forward, his confidence bolstered by the sword of revolution. With reckless determination, he struck from above, delivering a powerful blow that detonated in a massive explosion across the battlefield. Dust and fire filled the cavern as the shockwave threw both allies and enemies to the ground. Gilroshan stood firm, watching the scene unfold. He whispered to himself with grim clarity. Novice fighters always made the same mistake, believing the battle was over too soon. Professionals, however, remained vigilant until the very end. These reckless men had committed the fatal error of lowering their guard too quickly, and the price would be devastating. A weight pressed on his chest as he admitted that he too had faltered, allowing himself to relax too early. Now, fear coursed through him. The realization struck deep. This was not just about others dying anymore. The next phase of the battle could very well claim his own life. Chapter 9. Gilroshan's thoughts grew heavy as the weight of despair threatened to crush him. His mind struggled to remain clear, searching desperately for a way to handle the worsening situation before him. For a fleeting moment, he felt as though every option had already been exhausted. Just as that hopelessness began to take root, Karls appeared at his side. His presence carried a steadying calm as he reassured Gilroshan not to let fear overwhelm him. Karls reminded him that he was not alone, for they were there to protect him no matter the danger. He emphasized that the knights, the special forces, and the priests of vengeance were not ordinary warriors. Each of them had defied death many times before, and they would endure this battle as well. Karls spoke warmly, his tone filled with encouragement. He expressed his relief at seeing Gilroshan returning to his true self, the version of him that carried conviction rather than fear. However, Karls also warned him not to shoulder every burden alone. With a brighter smile, he added that if the responsibilities became too heavy, Gilroshan should never hesitate to share them with him. Gilroshan looked at Karls with an intensely serious expression. He asked him not to speak in ways that suggested his end, for he could not bear the thought of losing those who stood by him. At that same moment, one of the soldiers collapsed, his breathing ragged as he struggled to remain conscious. His commander rushed to his side, concern etched across his face, and tried to steady him. Though weakened, the soldier insisted with difficulty that he was fine and would continue fighting. The commander's heart sank, for he sensed that the situation was rapidly deteriorating. His thoughts turned toward Gilroshan's strategy, and he quickly analyzed the plan. Gilroshan's approach relied on two objectives. The first was to distract the monster Gromhart, drawing its focus away from the more vulnerable fighters. The second was to create an opening for targeted, precise attacks. Yet, the commander recognized that the gap in skill among the soldiers was significant. Their focus was beginning to falter, and the lack of experience in such dire conditions was showing. Their stamina drained rapidly, leaving them vulnerable. The commander decided he could not wait any longer. He drew upon the power of his magical weapon and charged forward with determined force. His strike landed solidly against Gromhart, making the beast stagger backward. However, he realized immediately that the blow alone was insufficient. What he needed was magical reinforcement. He shouted with all his strength, calling for Sway to unleash her magic. Turvin, answering instead, unleashed her fire magic across Gromhart's body. The flames burst into a violent explosion, covering the monster in searing heat. Relief washed over the commander as he saw the flames engulf their enemy. He muttered to himself that the result was good. Yet his relief did not last long. To his horror, Gromhart shook off the flames with little sign of damage. The beast's wicked gaze fixed on him, ignoring Sway entirely. He realized too late that he had made himself the primary target by attacking alone. The monster lunged forward with overwhelming force, swinging its massive axe with enough power to split the earth. The commander braced himself, but the devastating blow struck him, ripping a scream from his throat. Pain tore through his body, and despair quickly followed. Certain that death was imminent, he reflected bitterly that at least he had served honorably as commander of the knights. His acceptance of death felt absolute, until the moment an unexpected ally appeared. Ripple, one of the rebel priests, intervened at the last possible moment. He saved the commander from being finished off and urged him to focus on the battle rather than waste time with gratitude. Ripple pointed out that the commander had drawn the monster's wrath by recklessly making such a commotion on his own. He proposed that they fight together to form a greater distraction, giving the others a chance to recover. The commander agreed without hesitation. United, Ripple and the commander pressed their attacks, forcing Gromheart onto the defensive. Their combined strength finally managed to stagger the creature. Meanwhile, Sway prepared another spell and delivered a direct hit that exploded against Gromheart's body. The impact left the monster visibly shaken, a clear sign that their persistence was working. Gilroshan felt a surge of relief at the sight. His expression brightened as he praised the commander and Ripple for their courage and effectiveness. He saw their actions as a turning point, declaring that things were beginning to go well. From afar, Sway lifted her chin with confidence and urged Gilroshan to watch carefully, declaring that this was true magic at work. Despite the success, Gilroshan's relief quickly faded. He noticed Gromheart shifting into a more dangerous state. The monster entered its third and final phase, and Gilroshan's instincts warned him of what that meant. In this form, Gromheart's resilience and healing powers diminished, but his offensive power multiplied several times over. The beast abandoned defense entirely, devoting every ounce of strength to destruction. The knights and priests prepared themselves for what they understood to be the ultimate confrontation. The atmosphere grew tense as Gromheart radiated a destructive energy that threatened every life around him. Then the monster's gaze turned directly onto Gilroshan. The system confirmed his dread, presenting a clear message. Gromheart's wicked eye had locked onto him. He realized that he had become the prime target, singled out as the weakest among them. His chest tightened with unease, fully aware of the mortal danger. He cried out to the others to be ready, his warning carrying urgency. Gromheart's voice erupted in a furious roar, mocking them for daring to challenge him. He vowed to tear them apart and reduce them all to dust. Before the monster could strike, a sudden tremor shook the battlefield. Massive boulders crashed down from above, slamming directly into Gromheart's massive frame. Gilroshan's eyes widened in disbelief. He questioned whether such a rockfall was even possible in this place. The soldiers stared with equal shock, asking one another what had just happened and looking toward Gilroshan in awe, wondering who he truly was. The mighty Gromheart collapsed under the crushing weight, his body mangled by the unexpected strike. Silence followed as everyone stood stunned, scarcely able to believe the battle had ended in such a way. Soldiers whispered uncertainly, asking if they had truly defeated the monster. One soldier approached the commander to praise his bravery, yet the commander dismissed the praise humbly, insisting that his role had been minor. Gilroshan, however, felt unsettled. His thoughts churned with confusion. It should not have been possible for rocks to fall in this environment. As his eyes scanned the battlefield, he noticed a cloaked figure standing at a distance, watching intently. Suspicion flared in Gilroshan's heart. He walked toward the figure and demanded to know who he was. The figure remained silent, offering no explanation. Gilroshan pressed further, finally asking bluntly whether the stranger was a player like him. The cloaked figure smirked and replied cryptically that he had no obligation to answer, especially since he himself did not even know who Gilroshan truly was. The response stung with arrogance. Gilroshan retorted sharply, saying that he did not know who the stranger was either, and owed him no answers. Without another word, the figure turned and walked away, leaving only questions behind. Gilroshan stood in silence, his thoughts bitter. He concluded that the man was pettier than anyone he had ever met, vanishing into the shadows with his secrets intact. Chapter 10. Shortly after the battle, Gilroshan and his group reached Gromheart's treasure vault. Upon entering, they were met with an unexpected sight. The entire vault stood completely empty, devoid of even a single coin or artifact. Confusion spread among the soldiers as one of them muttered in disbelief, questioning whether the vault had truly been empty all along. Gilroshan remained calm and, with a faint smile, turned toward Sir Pellet. He remarked that the vault was not actually empty and asked him in a teasing tone whether he could not see what was right in front of him. One of the others, still trying to make sense of the situation, awkwardly asked whether the prince was referring to barrels of alcohol or something of that sort. Before anyone could respond, a soldier stepped forward and announced that the monster Gromheart was truly dead. He called for anyone hiding nearby to come out immediately. Slowly, the hidden survivors began to emerge from the shadows. Among them, a man suddenly cried out with excitement, claiming to recognize the man standing before them. Overcome with emotion, he shouted that their savior was none other than Eolim and that they were finally safe. One of the priests stepped forward and calmly corrected the misunderstanding. He clarified that the man before them was not the god Eolim, but rather a humble servant of the great church, sent to aid them. The captain of the Special Operations Knights then declared that they were knights of the Empire and had come to rescue the captives. The villagers exchanged confused looks. Some of them had never heard of the Special Operations Unit. An elderly man stepped forward and spoke with a trembling voice. He explained that his son had always told him the Empire would come to save them and had asked him to hold on. However, his expression suddenly twisted in grief and rage. He screamed that they had come too late. His son had already been devoured by the monster. The man pointed toward the beast's remains, shouting that his child now lay inside its belly. He accused the soldiers of arriving only after it was too late, pretending to be saviors when the real suffering had already occurred. Shaking with fury and heartbreak, he cried out, asking if they had any idea what it meant to watch one's own child torn apart while being powerless to stop it. He asked in anguish what he was supposed to say to his dead son now that help had come far too late. The man then screamed that he did not want to be saved. He said he would rather die than receive help from knights who had arrived after everything was already lost. He demanded that they leave him alone. One of the soldiers whispered to the commander that perhaps they should retreat for now. The commander, deeply affected by the man's grief, lowered his head and offered a sincere apology. He told the man that he was truly sorry for what had happened. Gilroshan then stepped forward. With composed sincerity, he addressed the survivors. He explained that the monsters of the Rockman Mountains had recently become more active, attacking nearby villages and abducting civilians. He said that he had encountered the Priest of Vengeance and, together with the Special Operations Knights, they had succeeded in defeating Gromhart. He added that the Knight Commander had been ordered to protect the villages and eliminate the threat. Gilroshan then bowed deeply before everyone. On behalf of the Empire, he offered his deepest apologies for all the suffering they had endured. He acknowledged that no words could erase their pain, but said this was the least he could offer. One of the survivors, surprised by the young man's humility, asked him who he was. Gilroshan straightened and introduced himself clearly. He revealed that he was Gilroshan Elra de Valt, the third prince of the Empire. Everyone fell silent in shock. Whispers spread through the group, recalling the third prince's reputation for drunkenness and reckless behavior. They could not comprehend how a prince would lower himself to bow before commoners. An older captive addressed the grieving father. He told him that the true villain was the monster, not the knights or the prince who had come to help. Another man stepped forward and, with sorrow in his voice, said that he had also lost his wife during this incident and had lost his children to famine in previous years. He explained that if he followed them into death, he would have nothing to say when he saw them again in the afterlife. He urged the grieving man to keep living and create good memories to share with his loved ones one day. Meanwhile, Gilroshan was reflecting on the battle. Defeating Gromhart had brought no real treasure. The monster hunted only humans and left behind nothing of material value. He suspected that this was only the beginning of a greater and more dangerous chain of events. At that moment, a special reward manifested before him. It was a potion of strength that could temporarily enhance his physical power. Gilroshan wondered whether this potion was the true reward for the ordeal and whether rescuing the captives had simply been a byproduct. One of the survivors approached Gilroshan gently. He asked the prince to raise his head, saying he seemed unlike any noble he had ever imagined and felt more like a regular person. Gilroshan then made a small request. The man explained that his son's name was Hole. He said Hole had been just an ordinary boy, yet he meant everything to him. The man begged Gilroshan to remember his son's name and never forget it. He broke down in tears, holding Gilroshan's hand tightly and asking him to make that promise. Gilroshan placed his other hand over the man's and, with quiet reassurance, told him that he would never forget Hole's name. At that moment, the commander of the Special Knights spoke quietly to a soldier. He admitted that this was his first time meeting the third prince in person and that he seemed nothing like the rumors. He said that some of the captives had even suggested the prince should be the next emperor. The thought left him uneasy, and he told the soldier to stop speaking of it. Marquis Elon began walking briskly, instructing his deputy to focus on managing the refugees while he personally verified a few matters. Later, inside Gilroshan's tent, the prince asked Carls in surprise whether he had really been hiding all this time just to carry out such a task. Carls explained that his mission was to stay close and protect him, as was his duty as a royal guard. He added that despite this, he had not been of much help. Inside the tent, Gilroshan stood at a tea table with Carls and Sway. With a smile, he invited Carls to share some warm tea with him, saying that his shoulders felt heavy. Carls replied dryly, remarking that the prince was truly beyond saving. Shortly afterward, Marquis Elon entered the tent and thanked Gilroshan for waiting. Gilroshan replied that he had indeed waited longer than expected. The Marquis mentioned that his deputy had shared some interesting observations about the prince. This caught Gilroshan's attention and he cautiously asked what exactly had been said. Elon noticed Carl's uncomfortable expression and asked him what it meant. Carls hesitated, then dismissed it as nothing important. The Marquis nodded and smiled faintly, saying that was good. However, his expression soon turned serious. He asked the prince directly whether he still intended to go to the city of Orex. Gilroshan replied with firm confidence. He said he understood the Marquis's concerns, but he had already made up his mind. He wanted to change, and to achieve that change, he needed to go to Orex. He warned that if the Marquis tried to stop him, he would not hesitate to push through by force if necessary. The Marquis was stunned and wondered whether the prince had lost his mind. Tired of the discussion, Elon remarked that the prince was joking far too much. He added that he was a professional duelist, something the prince might not understand. Only 3 duelists in the empire had reached the highest rank, and he was one of them. With a mocking tone, he asked how Gilroshan intended to defeat someone like him. Elon then apologized to the prince and firmly stated that he would not allow him to go to Orex. He said he would instead return him to the palace and eliminate the remaining rebels in the forest. In response, Gilroshan formally challenged Marquis Elon Lloyd of House Lloyd to an official noble duel and demanded that he accept. He taunted the Marquis, asking if he was afraid of losing due to his injured shoulder and whether he was truly feeling fear. The Marquis grew furious. He said he did not know how the prince had learned of his injury, but if his goal had been to provoke him, he had succeeded. Marquis Elon then solemnly declared that he accepted the noble duel challenge from the prince. Chapter 11. The Marquis stood before Gilroshan and asked what rules he wanted for the duel. Gilroshan held the Marquis's gaze and realized that the man carried unshakable confidence, never even considering defeat. Calmly, Gilroshan declared the rules. Only swordsmanship would be allowed, no magic. Armor was forbidden. The duel would end when one fighter dropped his weapon. He finished by asking if the Marquis accepted. A system message appeared before Gilroshan, announcing that the noble duel event had begun and that his opponent was Elon Louis. The soldiers watching could barely contain their disbelief. They whispered to each other, mocking the third prince, saying he must have gone mad to challenge a royal knight commander of the highest duelist rank. Some claimed the pampered prince had never touched real combat and was nothing but a useless burden. One voice stood apart from the ridicule. The Marquis's deputy spoke with restrained respect. He told Gilroshan that he seemed unprepared and that his chosen rules favored Elon far more than himself. Elon then began speaking directly, repeating what his deputy had said about the prince having changed. However, he dismissed the idea, saying people did not change so easily. Elon declared that Gilroshan surely heard the whispers that followed him everywhere. Actions, not words, define the truth of one's character. Elon continued with cold precision, telling Gilroshan that even if he wished to shed the label of the foolish third prince, even if he had truly changed, reshaping the way others saw him would be harder than he imagined. Then his expression shifted. He wondered aloud how Gilroshan had discovered his injured shoulder. Gilroshan met his words with sharp sarcasm, remarking that Elon spoke far too much. He asked whether the Marquis believed the title of swordmaster came from endless lectures and reminded him that he had not come here to listen. With grim seriousness, Gilroshan stated that his purpose was to defeat Elon, and afterward he would travel to Orex to create a foundation where he and his allies could grow stronger. His voice carried another sharp barb as he questioned whether this path was better than letting Carls waste his life drinking. Inside, Gilroshan admitted that changing himself was far less important than breaking the image of the useless, failed prince that had become his identity. A system message declared that the power zone had been activated. His physical strength increased, and he wondered briefly if his transformation had been too extreme. Perhaps soon people would whisper that the fool had pretended weakness all along. Turning toward Elon with confidence, Gilroshan ended the exchange. He said there was no reason for further words. If Elon wanted to see whether he was worthy, he would have to find out directly. Elon bristled with anger. His sarcasm cut deeply as he accused Gilroshan of ruining Carl's future. He claimed the prince now dared to speak of worthiness even after dragging his son into enemy territory. He shouted whether that was truly better than letting Carl spend his days drinking idly. Elon's fury ignited as he advanced to the dueling ground, determined to strike. Inwardly, he vowed that if Gilroshan was unworthy of guiding Karl's, then he would end his life here and prevent him from ever reaching Orex. His steps were heavy with intimidation, pressing on Gilroshan's nerves. Gilroshan felt fear rise within him and wondered whether he had provoked Elon beyond reason. He forced himself to focus, reminding himself there was no room for hesitation. His only goal was victory. Elon's first strikes came like a storm. Gilroshan barely managed to block, admitting inwardly that he had almost taken a direct blow. His movements felt slower than Elon's speed, and though he could see openings, he was trapped in defense and unable to counterattack. The soldiers shouted with admiration for their commander, praising his unmatched skill. They ridiculed the prince for struggling to hold his ground. Meanwhile, Elon secretly acknowledged that the prince's skill was greater than expected, though he mocked him in his mind by saying perhaps his flashy displays had some value. Gilroshan meanwhile felt suffocated by Elon's relentless strikes. He told himself he had to aim at the weaknesses he had seen, but the non-stop assault gave him no chance. Elon's style came in endless chains of blows, each flowing into the next. Gilroshan realized that unless he disrupted the rhythm, he would never recover. His anxiety deepened when he noticed that the special ability of his Nomad Swift Blade had not yet activated. A system message appeared, telling him that the weapon's secret remained locked. His uncertainty grew. As he hesitated, Elon struck again with frightening force. His voice thundered as he demanded to know if Gilroshan understood who he was facing. The Marquis unleashed a strike so powerful that Gilroshan was thrown to the ground. Pain surged through him, yet he screamed within himself that he had to rise. The duel was not finished. Elon loomed over him with killing intent. Karl's rushed to Gilroshan's side, his voice anxious as he asked if he was all right. Gilroshan asked why Elon had stepped back and whether that meant he had lost. Karl's explained that the duel ended only when one combatant dropped his weapon. Elon had withdrawn because as a knight of honor, he could not strike a downed opponent. Furthermore, Gilroshan had fallen too near the audience, so Elon had returned to the center. Karl's then asked with deep concern whether Gilroshan could continue. Gilroshan, though weary, declared with conviction that he would win. Karl studied him, silent for a moment, then lowered his head. After a pause, he said he would believe in him. He urged him never to lose, no matter the circumstances. Karl's then gave him advice, speaking with firm seriousness. The Trafalgar style relied on dazzling speed and relentless attack chains. If Gilroshan allowed Elon to continue without interruption, he would lose without question. Karl's insisted that the only path was to break the chain before it began. He urged Gilroshan to focus solely on Elon, never allowing even a heartbeat of distraction. Gilroshan thanked Karl's calmly and promised he would return victorious. Rising, he stepped back into the arena, repeating the advice in his mind. At that moment, his system highlighted the points of Elon's next strikes, marking the locations and timing. Now he could see the flow of attacks clearly. It might be considered cheating in this world, but he accepted it. He admitted that his earlier reliance on defense came from fear of Elon's speed. The gap between the game he remembered and the reality he now lived had unsettled him. The crowd began shouting loudly, urging the prince onward. They demanded he show his strength and prove his worth. Their voices grew more determined, declaring that he must not lose. Gilroshan flushed with embarrassment. He whispered inwardly that their cheering was unnecessary and wondered whether it had gone too far. Nevertheless, he gripped his sword tightly and steadied himself. He told himself that while he did not yet fully understand this world, he knew its rules better than anyone else. Elon stood before him once again. His eyes were cold as he asked if Gilroshan was ready to continue. Gilroshan smiled with confidence and said he had been ready from the start, though he admitted quietly to himself that he had felt nervous. Elon's expression darkened. He remarked coldly that it was remarkable Gilroshan could still feign confidence under such conditions. Chapter 12. Gilroshan answered calmly, acknowledging that from the perspective of Marquis Elon, his earlier actions might indeed appear as pretense, and he could understand why the Marquis thought so. Inwardly, he recalled a long-kept secret regarding the nomad sword style. Its true evolution into a higher form could only be achieved when it directly and effectively clashed against the Trafalgar style. He reminded himself that the key condition to unlock this transformation required him to land 3 consecutive strikes on the same weak point of his opponent. Everything he had executed until now had been mere preparation, a deliberate prelude to facing Marquis Elon in earnest. A rush of excitement surged within him as he acknowledged that the true battle was only now beginning. With determination, Gilroshan declared that this time he would fight with his full strength. Marquis Elon immediately sensed the sudden shift in the young prince. His crimson eyes, the defining mark of the imperial Valt bloodline, now gleamed with sharp intensity. Elon admitted inwardly that he had seen the prince before, yet never with eyes so filled with power. He steadied his stance, signaling that he was ready to meet Gilroshan's full assault. Gilroshan charged forward with explosive speed, striking with a force that shook the ground. Marquis Elon managed to block, though the effort forced him slightly backward as the impact unleashed a shockwave that rippled through the courtyard. He thought briefly that the prince's strength had indeed improved, though not nearly enough to threaten him seriously. Without pause, both men traded a flurry of swift, heavy strikes, each clash resounding with dangerous intensity. Gilroshan was struck with awe at the sheer might of his opponent. Marquis Elon's strength felt monstrous, as if he were battling a beast rather than a man. Yet he reassured himself quickly, refusing to be overwhelmed. He would no longer allow hesitation or endless defense to bind him. His purpose was clear, and hesitation would only ensure his defeat. The duel intensified as Gilroshan lunged again with precise accuracy. His blade struck directly upon a vulnerable point, and the system promptly confirmed the accuracy of his attack. His eyes narrowed with sharp focus, preparing for what needed to follow. A second strike landed, once more confirmed by the system as a successful blow. This counted as the first step toward fulfilling the hidden objective. Marquis Elon staggered slightly, his eyes flashing with surprise. He wondered silently whether such precision was luck or whether the prince possessed more hidden depth than expected. Determined to test further, Marquis Elon retaliated with a sudden burst of speed, lunging toward Gilroshan with astonishing ferocity. The prince was startled, but he quickly steadied his mind, reminding himself that he could not lose focus. His only goal was to keep targeting the weak points without allowing distraction. The opening for another strike appeared, though it left him in a vulnerable position. He seized the chance nonetheless, exploiting a small gap in the Marquis's defense, and his blade connected once more. The blow visibly injured Elon. A strange, unsettling smile spread across Gilroshan's face after the successful strike. Marquis Elon noted the expression with discomfort, bewildered that the prince would smile amid such brutal combat. The soldiers who stood as witnesses were equally shaken, unable to believe what they were seeing unfold before their eyes. The system then confirmed that Gilroshan had fulfilled the hidden condition necessary to evolve the nomad sword style. The advanced technique, Heiwu blade, became available to him. Gilroshan processed the change with amazement. He knew that the Heiwu blade was a technique of extraordinary rarity, created by the nomads of the eastern continent and treasured as a unique art even within the game's later versions. To gain access to it now was a remarkable opportunity. A window appeared before him, demanding that he select an additional effect. He chose Flower Step, a movement enhancement to accompany the blade. The duel resumed with new intensity as Gilroshan prepared to unleash the first form of the Heiwu blade. He launched into the technique with surging confidence, his movements sharper and swifter than before. His blade blurred as it danced across the air. The soldiers watching could hardly believe their eyes, murmuring among themselves about how the prince's sword had suddenly become so fast. Some speculated whether he had hidden his true strength all along. One soldier expressed grave concern, admitting that if the battle continued in this manner, Marquis Elon might actually fall. Another soldier scoffed harshly at the suggestion, insisting that Elon had not yet revealed his true battle stance. He accused his fellow soldier of lacking pride as a special operations knight. He added more firmly that their commander was among the Empire's greatest duelists, a pillar of unmatched strength, and he would not lose so easily. Marquis Elon himself admitted privately that the prince's skill was impressive. Not only had Gilroshan discovered his weak point, but he had also wielded an Eastern technique capable of countering the Trafalgar style. Even so, the Marquis's voice carried unyielding resolve as he declared that no matter what transformations the prince had undergone, or even if he had been reborn entirely, he would never permit him to take Karls to the city of Orex. Unease rippled through Gilroshan. He realized that his temporary burst of power could not last indefinitely. Time was slipping away, and he had yet to force Elon into his true form. Desperation drove him toward a bolder plan. He chose to provoke Elon where it hurt most, through Karls. He questioned whether the thought of losing Karls troubled the Marquis so deeply, and he stated that Karls was like a brother to him, someone he would never endanger. He explained that Karls himself wished to travel with him to Orex, asking mockingly why Elon opposed it so stubbornly. He pressed harder, declaring that he was closer to Carl's than Elon ever had been. To Gilroshan, Elon was nothing more than a father by blood, not by bond. He ended by challenging Elon openly, accusing him of having no right to act as a father after years of neglect. To his astonishment, Marquis Elon did not erupt in rage. The lack of response unsettled him, for he had anticipated an outburst. Confusion clouded his mind as he reconsidered what he knew of the man. In the original game, Elon had been portrayed as a model knight and unshakable patriot, striking down players for only two reasons: a direct challenge or a disparaging remark about his son that exposed weakness in their bond. For him not to react suggested something had shifted. Gilroshan began to wonder whether Elon and Carl's relationship had already reached its peak. At last, Marquis Elon's fury surfaced, his breaths coming deep and heavy. He spoke with growing intensity, accusing Gilroshan of acting as if he understood everything. A dark aura flared around him, radiating overwhelming power. He admitted coldly that he had once been willing to let Gilroshan walk away alive for the sake of the Emperor's watching eyes. However, his rising anger burned away that restraint. He declared that if the prince lost this duel, he would not leave alive. The battle would conclude only with the death of one of them. The declaration struck Gilroshan deeply. Rage filled him as he demanded how Elon dared to speak in such a way. He reminded him that whether prince or not, the Emperor's authority still stood above them both. He asked whether Elon truly believed he could act without consequence. In response, the Marquis spoke with chilling finality. His voice carried like a sentence pronounced, saying farewell to the third prince as if sealing the duel's fatal end. Chapter 13. Gilroshan and Marquis Elon clashed with relentless speed, their movements almost imperceptible to the crowd. The exchange of blows continued until, to everyone's astonishment, Marquis Elon's sword slipped from his hand. Silence fell over the battlefield as the surrounding soldiers gaped in disbelief, unable to comprehend why their commander had dropped his weapon in the middle of such a decisive moment. The tension broke when Carl's, battered but standing, stepped forward with difficulty. With his voice unsteady yet resolute, he declared Gilroshan Elra de Val the victor of the duel. Instantly, the crowd erupted in a storm of cheers and applause. The soldiers and spectators celebrated the prince's victory with fervent joy, their relief and admiration overflowing. Sui rushed to Gilroshan, her face glowing with delight as she congratulated him, while the system displayed a message informing him that the temporary effect of the strength potion had ended. Marquis Elon remained at a distance, frozen in disbelief. His mind replayed the final exchange again and again, searching for clarity. He tried to understand how the prince had anticipated his every move with uncanny precision. The memory of Gilroshan's faint, confident smile during the last strike unsettled him deeply. That single expression suggested that every motion had been calculated beforehand. When Gilroshan extended his hand and asked with calm assurance whether he had truly won, Elon hesitated in silence. For a moment, the prince wondered uneasily whether the veteran knight would truly accept the outcome. After a long pause, Marquis Elon's stern face softened into a faint smile. He thought silently that the young prince had indeed changed and that the situation had grown far more intriguing. To the astonishment of all present, the Marquis stepped forward, dropped to one knee, and acknowledged his defeat. He declared openly that he, Elon Lloyd of House Lloyd, recognized his loss before Prince Gilroshan, and admitted that the duel had been an honor. He spoke with dignity, admitting he had learned from the battle. The system immediately confirmed that the unexpected noble duel had concluded, awarding Gilroshan victory over Elon Lloyd. Yet murmurs of protest rose among the soldiers. Several shouted angrily, demanding a rematch and claiming the duel had been unjust, particularly since magic use had been restricted. Their cries grew louder until Marquis Elon silenced them with sharp authority. He declared that the rules had been proposed by the prince himself and accepted freely by him without coercion. He reminded his soldiers that he alone had dropped his weapon while the prince had not, and that was the end of it. His sharp glare swept across his men as he asked if they wished to be known as knights who disrespected their commander. Shamed and humbled, the soldiers bowed their heads, admitting they had been wrong. Gilroshan meanwhile reflected quietly on the duel. He knew that victory had been sealed the moment Elon's blade fell, though in truth, he could have shattered the man's weapon with his bare hands if necessary. More importantly, he recognized that Elon's acceptance of defeat symbolized his acknowledgement of Lucian as the rightful master of Carl's. That gesture carried immense significance. Sui ran toward Gilroshan and embraced him joyfully, speaking with determination about moving closer to her dream of becoming Lady of the Tower. Gilroshan responded lightly to Carl's, noting that their teacher would never go easy on him. Soon after, Marquis Elon approached with an unfamiliar softness in his demeanor. His warm, fatherly smile caught Gilroshan off guard, for it contrasted sharply with the man's usual strictness. Elon explained that he had ordered his deputy to safeguard the members of the system group hiding in the forest, pledging their safety. Since the prince had secured victory, Elon promised not to oppose his choices, though he wished to ask 3 questions. With quiet authority, Elon reminded Gilroshan that he was still commander of the Empire's knights and that Orex was enemy territory. He asked what the prince intended to accomplish there, explaining that he himself had once led secret missions into the city. He knew firsthand how treacherous Orex could be. He described it as a place unlike any other, one that devoured the careless. Gilroshan listened patiently before replying. He told the Marquis that he understood Orex well enough. Elon was surprised and pressed him to clarify. Gilroshan explained that Orex was unlike the imperial capital Curtin. It was a labyrinth of chaos, infested with thieves and filled with black markets where life and death were traded freely. Illegal goods thrived there, and disorder ruled every street. Yet despite its corruption, it remained a place where people lived. Elon countered firmly that those people were not of the imperial family. Gilroshan acknowledged this with clear sarcasm, asking if the Marquis required a more detailed description. He then calmly stated that Orex was home to 6 armed factions, including 2 powerful churches. Before he could speak further, Elon cut him off sharply, ordering him never to mention the leader of the revolutionary army. Gilroshan remembered well that within the empire, even uttering that name was considered a grave crime. Gilroshan reassured the Marquis that he had no intention of joining the revolutionary army. He explained that Orex instead offered a unique opportunity, one so significant that even a prince with nothing could overturn the world. The Marquis was shaken when he realized Gilroshan referred to the dragon's nest. The prince confirmed this boldly, saying he intended to tame a dragon. He explained that the nest was a forbidden place sealed to all races except dragons. Entry by outsiders was impossible unless they completed a special mission. Success would grant them the power to ride and command dragons. Elon trembled at the thought, believing the prince had lost his mind. He pleaded with Gilroshan to reconsider, warning that the task was both impossible and suicidal. Yet Gilroshan stood unwavering. He reminded Elon that he had already defeated him in a duel and that this was the path he had chosen. He urged him to move on to the next question. The Marquis, troubled, asked how he should report these matters to the emperor. This unsettled Gilroshan, for he could not reveal the truth to Emperor Barishan Ko-Defal. The ruler of the magical empire was infamous for his cruelty, intelligence, and madness, known as the most ruthless emperor in history. Gilroshan's thoughts turned dark as he recalled the man others called his father. Finally, he told Elon simply to report that he had become a messenger. The Marquis was stunned, asking if he referred to the rare condition known as messenger syndrome. The system clarified that this syndrome granted prophetic visions to those scarred by trauma but ultimately destroyed their health until death. Gilroshan remained silent on the matter, thinking that the excuse fit his situation perfectly. However, he also instructed Elon to tell the emperor that he sought the Tears of Dawn, a rare imperial artifact belonging to someone close to the emperor. That message would carry unmistakable meaning. When pressed for the 3rd question, Elon instead made a request. He asked that the prince delay his departure until the next day to allow rest, food, and treatment. Gilroshan realized this request stemmed from Elon's concern for his son Carl's, and he agreed. That evening, they gathered around a campfire. The air was filled with warmth and companionship as laughter and conversation flowed. Elon gazed at Carl's with pride and affection, his heart softened with peace. Suddenly, one of the companions stood and excitedly announced that he wanted to call everyone his elder brothers. His sudden declaration bewildered the entire group. He approached another companion with exaggerated enthusiasm, placing his hands on his shoulders and repeating his claim, leaving all stunned by his strange behavior. Gilroshan watched in confusion, questioning silently what was wrong with this man. Breaking the awkwardness, Carl's admitted to Gilroshan that he felt uneasy. Sway echoed his unease, wondering aloud if they were truly following the right path. Elon then addressed Gilroshan with calm sincerity. He said that all preparations had been completed and wished for his safe return. Though he confessed he did not fully understand the prince, his curiosity had grown immensely. He entrusted Carl's to Gilroshan's care, and the prince promised confidently that he could be relied upon. At last, Gilroshan gave the signal to depart. With determination he declared their destination. The group set out, led by Sway, Carl's, and Gilroshan himself, their eyes fixed on the path ahead. Their journey now had one clear goal, Orex. Chapter 14. Gilroshan and his companions stepped into a brilliant light as the massive teleportation gate carried them toward Orex. When the radiance faded, they arrived at their destination, and a voice informed the prince that they had finally reached the city. Gilroshan repeated the name softly in astonishment, taking in the reality that they had arrived in Orex. A system message appeared before him, announcing that the mission of escaping from danger had been successfully completed. He immediately recalled the first mission he had received after entering this world, which had been to flee the Imperial lands, and he began to wonder what kind of reward awaited him for completing it. Another window appeared, displaying his prizes. He had obtained 30 gold coins, a beginner's travel equipment set, the inventory spell which was now available, and a guaranteed D-rank fate card draw ticket. Gilroshan considered it a surprisingly generous reward, even if the guaranteed card was only of D rank. At this early stage, any advantage was welcome. He reminded himself that he was now at level 9, and once he reached level 10, the opportunity for a second card draw would arrive. He thought carefully about how valuable that would be. While he could not control which card he would acquire, having an additional D-rank card early on would be a meaningful advantage. Another system message appeared, informing him that unwanted cards could be dismantled and their experience transferred to others. Without hesitation, he prepared the F-rank Slave Gladiator card for dismantling, hoping to recycle its worth. As he waited, he silently wished for something like the Supreme Mage or Great Archmage card. His wishful thinking was interrupted when soldiers suddenly appeared, ordering the immediate arrest of everyone present. Shock washed over Gilroshan, and he quickly wondered if this was the infamous Titan Special Unit. Carls turned to him nervously, addressing him as His Highness. Gilroshan, however, remained calm and reminded Carls of his earlier words. He had told them before departing that no matter what happened, they must not act recklessly. They were no longer in Imperial territory, and no noble authority could shield them from the consequences of rash actions. Bound and restrained once again, Gilroshan reflected with frustration on how often this kept happening to him. A soldier approached mockingly, remarking that choosing not to resist had been a wise decision. He then sneered and declared that the idea of the third prince of the empire being a messenger of Eolim was laughable. He asked sarcastically whether Gilroshan truly believed anyone would believe such nonsense. Gilroshan seized the soldier in anger, but the man continued to mock him, remarking that such defiance suited a rebellious prince. With a cruel smile, the soldier warned him not to deceive the high priest if he truly was not chosen as Eolim's messenger. Recognition struck Gilroshan immediately. The man before him was Vamiyo. The realization shook him deeply. Sui, unable to contain her fury, screamed at Vamiyo, accusing him of betrayal and demanding to know how he could turn on them after all they had done for him. Elsewhere in Orex, a closed book rested on a table. A mysterious woman reached out and placed her hand upon it before lifting her head. Adjusting her glasses, her violet eyes came into view as she calmly welcomed Gilroshan to the city. He met her gaze and remarked that it was a violent way to greet someone, asking mockingly if these were truly the teachings of Eolim. He pointed out that he had spared the men sent to kill him, even releasing them unharmed, and now this was the gratitude he received in return. The woman smirked, asking if he really wanted to play this game. Gilroshan thought quickly, recognizing that Vamiyo was a professional assassin. He recalled how much effort it had taken to handle Marquis Elon Loit and reasoned that Vamiyo must have already sent detailed reports ahead through secretive methods. They had clearly planned his downfall well in advance. The woman then revealed her identity. She was Hendel Frey, the high priestess of the Great Temple of Eolim, a woman of immense influence with clear ties to the Revolutionary Army. Her body was said to bear deep scars, her face concealed by a mask, and her decisions were known to be careful and deliberate. Gilroshan watched her warily, suspecting she might attempt to use him against the Empire. With composure, he openly confessed that he had impersonated their god. Hendel responded coldly that his confession changed nothing about their present reality. Gilroshan pressed on, explaining that he understood why the Empire's Minister of Internal Affairs feared her alliance. He even remarked that, in the minister's place, he too would be terrified. Hendel smiled faintly, acknowledging that his awareness was impressive. Gilroshan retorted with sarcasm, insisting he was not impressed by any of this. He reminded her that because of her, he had been forced into a duel against Marquis Elon Loit, a professional duelist. He then smirked and pointed out that he had actually won, making his case different. With confidence, he asked Hendel if she intended to kill him. He challenged her to go ahead if that was her choice, but warned that she would regret such a decision. He declared firmly that without his help, she and her allies would never be able to stop the approaching catastrophe. He explained that in about 10 days, Orex would be struck by a disaster so immense it would claim countless lives and plunge the city into despair. Hendel asked seriously what catastrophe he meant, wondering if it would be an earthquake. Gilroshan answered calmly, pointing out that Orex had the grand cathedral where gods could manifest directly. He reminded her that divine power could prevent many disasters, then asked mockingly if she was aware of this or not. Finally, he suggested that the first step should be removing his restraints. Handel replied with composure that actions had to be carried out in proper order. She then ordered the soldiers to take him to the underground prison. Gilroshan was caught off guard by the decision, realizing this was not the outcome he had anticipated. In the prison, he found Carls and Sway already waiting for him, their faces filled with concern. They asked if he was well and whether the meeting with the High Priestess had gone smoothly. Gilroshan reassured them with a confident smile. Carls explained that Vamiyo had visited them and even provided food. Sway added that he had explained some of the current situation in Orex. Gilroshan immediately guessed that Vamiyo had spoken of the power struggles in the city. When Sway asked how he knew, Carls clarified further. He said that the Grand Cathedral of Kishiras and the Titan Special Unit were overseeing the Church of Eolim. He also revealed that the Church of Kishiras demanded that someone like Gilroshan be executed or exiled to ease tensions. Gilroshan explained calmly that 6 armed factions existed within the revolutionary forces. The Church of Eolim, symbolized by a tiger, stood in opposition to the Church of Kishiras, symbolized by a fox. He added that the border guards controlled the outer regions, while the city guard protected occupied zones. Beyond these forces, there was the 1st Reserve Corps and the Titan Special Unit, which reported directly to the Supreme Commander. However, the Supreme Commander was absent, leaving these groups divided about how to handle him. Gilroshan then asked Carls quietly if Vamiyo had said anything else. Carls hesitated but admitted that Vamiyo had remarked that many clever people like Gilroshan existed, and that acting like he was special only ensured he would keep digging himself deeper into failure. Sway added uneasily that she had not known what to say in response to Vamilo's words. She quickly apologized to Gilroshan, insisting she had not meant to agree with him. Suddenly, Gilroshan burst into laughter, startling both Carls and Sway. They worried that he had lost his composure, but he reassured them that his amusement was not at their expense. Sway vowed that the next time she met Vamiyo, she would punish him, but Gilroshan waved it off. At that moment, he noticed something beneath Sway's foot and asked her to lift it. She did so, revealing a hidden opening in the floor. Gilroshan instantly understood. This was Vamilo's true message, a secret instruction to escape through an underground tunnel. Chapter 15. Everyone turned their attention toward the tunnel's opening. Thick cobwebs clung to its edges, making it clear that the passage had not been used in a long time. Carls observed it with unease, remarking that the tunnel did not appear to extend very far. Gilroshan, however, responded with eagerness, insisting that they should climb down immediately. Carls suddenly froze, unsettled by the strange expression on Gilroshan's face, and asked anxiously why he was being stared at in that way. Carls hesitated further, explaining that even though it looked like nothing more than a simple hole, there might be hidden dangers inside. His nervousness grew stronger, and with a trembling voice, he admitted that he harbored a deep fear of spiders. This unexpected confession left the group shocked and confused. Gilroshan silently wondered if Carls had always possessed such a peculiar personality, noting that this situation felt very different from what he remembered of the original game. Turning his gaze toward Sway, Gilroshan's expression made her instantly nervous. She asked in alarm why he was looking at her like that, then accused him of wanting her to be the first to descend into the tunnel. Trying to mask her unease with irritation, Sway declared angrily that she would go down immediately, but Carls quickly tried to stop her and pleaded for her to wait. Before they could argue further, a warning voice rang out, telling Gilroshan not to move forward. At that very instant, a series of heavy crates fell from above, crashing down in a deadly ambush aimed at their position. Carls managed to shield Sway just in time, and both landed safely on the ground. Gilroshan found himself trapped beneath them, shouting for them to get off him. As the dust settled, 2 figures cloaked in darkness emerged from the shadows. One of them spoke, remarking that events had unfolded exactly as High Priest Vamiyo had predicted. Gilroshan stood quickly, brushing himself off, and addressed them with sarcasm, wondering if they truly needed to appear again in such an elaborate fashion. He then identified the leader among them as High Priestess Handel Frey. Handel approached with a mysterious smile, remarking that Gilroshan surely knew why she had come. Gilroshan thought privately that denying knowledge would be a lie. He admitted that although Vamiyo had treated him kindly, he was not someone who would gamble everything merely to assist an escape. It became increasingly clear to Gilroshan that another faction was carefully observing how Handel managed the situation. He realized that a convincing performance was necessary. Handel explained with confidence that she was not officially present, but had chosen to place her trust in him. At that moment, a system message appeared before Gilroshan, announcing a new quest titled "You're a Fugitive, and I'm the High Priestess." The quest revealed that the Revolutionary Army's internal disputes were far from settled, and that Handel Frey had made a special request of him. Rewards listed included a travel permit within Orex territory and 3 additional items. Gilroshan was surprised, since such a quest typically appeared only for players who shared a strong bond with Handel. Confused, he wondered why it had triggered him. Deciding to confront the issue, Gilroshan asked Handel why she trusted him, reminding her that he was an enemy agent who had even impersonated their god. Handel responded calmly, explaining that the Great Temple of Eolim had already sensed the coming catastrophe. She added that someone within the Revolutionary Army was directly involved in the conspiracy. To emphasize her point, she threw a dagger at a rat scurrying nearby, declaring that a traitor existed within their ranks. Both Gilroshan and Sway grew tense. Sway turned to Gilroshan with deep concern, asking how he had come across such dangerous knowledge. Handel smiled in an unsettling manner, pointing out that it was obvious how he had obtained it. She elaborated that although they received prophecies from their god, divine intervention never prevented disasters, since Eolim was a god of vengeance. She told him his understanding was incomplete. She revealed that the only certainty was that the coming catastrophe targeted the children of Orex and that the conspirator was hidden among the revolutionaries themselves. Speaking with gravity, Handel explained that their efforts to expose the traitor had failed because their movements were constantly monitored. This left them cornered and unable to progress. Gilroshan realized the logic behind her words. Their enemies had all the information, while they remained blind. Choosing to share what he knew, Gilroshan explained that the catastrophe would occur within 10 days, during a special celebration held in the Grand Cathedral of Kishiras. The event, called the Crimson Winds, was a coming-of-age ceremony for children. Once all the children were gathered, the catastrophe would begin. He revealed that a priest of Kishiras had devised a horrifying plan to restore faith by sacrificing all the boys present at the ritual. Failure to prevent it would turn the ceremony into one of despair. The revelation stunned everyone. Members of the group confirmed that this conspiracy indeed pointed toward the Kishiras faction. Kar stepped forward anxiously, questioning Gilroshan's certainty. The idea of killing their own children to strengthen influence seemed insane. Gilroshan explained that after the ceremony, children chose their paths, becoming clergy, soldiers, or merchants. However, the faith of Kishiras did not accept male clergy. Another member confirmed this truth, noting that the faction only accepted women or castrated men. Karls, visibly shaken, declared that the faction saw no worth in boys, treating them as nothing more than resources for rival groups. Outraged voices rose, denouncing the madness of sacrificing their own children for power, especially while claiming to be revolutionaries. Handel acknowledged their outrage and agreed that Kishiras had crossed a terrible line. Looking directly at Gilroshan, she admitted that she did not know how he had obtained such detailed information, yet she now believed releasing the third prince from prison had been the right decision. With solemnity, Handel bowed before Gilroshan and pleaded for his help to save the children. Another system message appeared, announcing a new quest titled Savior of the Children. The objective was to stop the conspiracy in the Grand Cathedral of Kishiras and protect the young lives. Rewards included a sacred treasure of Eolim and 2 additional items. Gilroshan agreed readily, saying that he would of course help since the matter concerned children. Yet he added mischievously that Handel should prepare an extra 50 gold coins as compensation for his earlier restraint. Handel was caught off guard, asking why he demanded gold in such a situation. Gilroshan replied with sarcasm, remarking that the temple was known for spending wealth freely and that he was not asking for anything beyond saving children. With a playful grin, he asked if she would pay him. Immediately, another system notification appeared, stating that he had successfully negotiated with a friendly character. The reward for Savior of the Children increased by 50 gold coins, and Gilroshan earned the title Novice Negotiator. Later, the group emerged quietly from a sewer tunnel into the streets of Orex. The city looked peaceful, unaware of the storm brewing. Gilroshan thanked Karls and Sway sincerely, expressing his hope that they would remain unharmed in the future. He then told Vamiyo that he was free to leave. As Vamiyo attempted to depart, Gilroshan suddenly stopped him with a sly smile, insisting that they were not finished. Vamiyo turned nervously, asking what he meant. Gilroshan stepped closer, reminding Vamiyo of the promise he had made in the name of Eolim, a promise of reward if Gilroshan escaped imperial territory safely. Vamiyo grew pale, realizing he was being cornered. Gilroshan teased him further, saying he could have asked for anything, before requesting that Vamiyo retrieve the Eye of Walakas. The demand stunned Vamiyo, who asked him to repeat it. Gilroshan confirmed happily, explaining that the item was no divine impossibility. Vamiyo was deeply unsettled, asking if Gilroshan realized the item belonged to the commander of the Revolutionary Army. Gilroshan replied calmly that he knew very well. A system note appeared, describing the Eye of Walakas as demon-forged glasses that allowed perfect tracking of trajectories. Gilroshan reassured Vamiyo that the commander was away and the glasses were in his office, making retrieval simple. Vamiyo panicked, declaring that he could not approach the commander's belongings under any circumstances. Before the matter could continue, 3 bandits appeared, shouting that they did not recognize Gilroshan or Vamiyo. Their leader mocked them, demanding they hand over all possessions if they wanted to live. He called Gilroshan a young master and Vamiyo an old man. Gilroshan grew irritated, thinking that these bandits had chosen the wrong day to interfere, especially with Vamiyo, who lacked patience for outsiders. Chapter 16. The bandits grew restless, their anger swelling until their leader shouted at Vamiyo, demanding that he surrender everything without delay. Vamilo's hand instinctively reached for his sword and he prepared to fight, yet Gilroshan stepped forward with calm composure. He told Vamiyo to leave the matter to him and focus instead on retrieving the glasses as promised. Gilroshan's words carried a confidence that left little room for argument, assuring him that everything would be fine. Vamiyo hesitated, worried about allowing the third prince to involve himself in such a confrontation. He protested, reminding Gilroshan that his position should shield him from these petty struggles. However, Gilroshan remained firm, declaring once again that he could handle the situation. He instructed Vamiyo to complete his task and promised that they would meet again after the mission was fulfilled. A mischievous grin spread across Gilroshan's face as he reminded him that everything they did now was for the sake of the children they intended to save. Vamiyo grew increasingly confused, uncertain of the prince's intentions or reasoning, yet the sincerity in Gilroshan's tone eventually persuaded him. After a moment of thought, he accepted the command and prepared to leave. The bandits attempted to stop him, shouting at him to stay, yet Gilroshan only smiled at them with an expression that radiated certainty. The leader of the bandits mocked the young prince, remarking that anyone capable of escaping the infamous back alley trio without losing a single possession must indeed be blessed with uncanny luck. His companions quickly echoed his words, jeering alongside him. Gilroshan narrowed his eyes, unsettled by their words. He wondered if these figures were merely inconsequential side characters, yet their presence confused him further. He questioned whether such characters had even existed in the original game. Despite his unease, Gilroshan regained his composure. He announced boldly that they should be thankful he had chosen not to kill them immediately. The bandit leader laughed mockingly, replying that he was indeed thankful, especially since he planned to take whatever Vamiyo had left behind. At that moment, Sway and Carls rushed onto the scene. Both were visibly anxious, calling out to Gilroshan and asking if he was unharmed. Gilroshan quietly reminded Carls not to address him as prince in public. They had recently escaped prison, and revealing his identity so carelessly would put them all at risk. Carls quickly apologized for his slip. Sway, on the other hand, glared at the bandits with frustration and asked Gilroshan if she should eliminate them quickly. The leader of the bandits stepped forward. His name was Thompson, and he made no effort to hide his hostility. He announced with anger that he was not intimidated by them. He claimed loudly that he was about to lose his patience and ordered his men to attack. The bandits immediately charged toward Gilroshan and his companions. Carl stepped forward before Gilroshan could move. His speed carried him past the others as he declared that he would deal with the enemies himself. With a powerful strike he called Bear Hunt, Carls knocked the bandits aside effortlessly, the sheer force of his attacks sending them sprawling. Gilroshan watched with mild surprise, muttering to himself that Carls had overdone it. He had wanted the chance to gain experience himself, but Carls had ended the clash too swiftly. As Carls continued to fight, Gilroshan called out and told him to stop. Carls froze, confused by the command, and asked why he should halt when the threat was still present. Gilroshan explained that one of the bandits was still standing, and this time he intended to deal with him personally. Carls objected, insisting that he could not allow the prince to risk his safety. He reminded Gilroshan that he had sworn to be his knight and that his duty was to protect him. With deep sincerity, he admitted that he had meant it when he begged Gilroshan to share his burden. Memories weighed on Carls as he spoke. He thought of his failures, of being unable to prevent the kidnapping, and he felt ashamed of how little he had accomplished since reuniting with his prince. He did not want to remain a knight who simply followed without impact. Gilroshan finally realized the root of Carl's frustration. The scars left from the Gromhard battle had lingered, where Carls had failed to make a difference. Gilroshan remembered how harshly he had mocked him then and silently regretted his cruelty. Carls spoke again, admitting with honesty that he wanted to be the sword that truly supported Gilroshan. He asked the prince to step back and allow him to fight, but before anything more could be said, the situation shifted. The remaining bandits screamed in fear as fire surged around them, blocking every path of escape. Sway had stepped forward with flames blazing in her hands. Her voice rang with cold certainty as she told the bandits that they had brought this upon themselves. She mocked their attempts to flee and threatened to burn them all if they dared to move another step. The flames illuminated her expression as she cornered them with her power. Thompson's bravado collapsed, replaced by panic. He begged her desperately for mercy, insisting that he had not actually harmed anyone yet. Sway responded with a smirk, pointing out that she did not see it that way. If they wished to burn, they were free to attempt escape. Then she turned to Carls and suggested that perhaps Gilroshan should handle the last of the fight himself. Carls looked at her in surprise, uncertain if she was serious. Sway calmly explained her reasoning. It was time for Gilroshan to begin learning how to protect himself, for the imperial family would not always be there to guard him. Even the palace and the empire, once considered unshakable, had proven vulnerable. Carls reluctantly agreed with her, adding that they would always remain at Gilroshan's side. Sway nodded gently, promising she too would always stay with him, yet she reminded Carls of reality. They were only human, the path Gilroshan had chosen would be perilous, and neither of them could guarantee survival. Carls lowered his head with worry and asked what would happen if Gilroshan was injured. Sway assured him they would continue to support him. Even if he faltered now, the future would give them countless chances to protect him. She believed that Gilroshan had chosen them as companions because he understood the dangers ahead. Allowing him to grow through struggle was itself an act of loyalty. Carls reflected on her words and realized how clouded his thinking had been. At that moment, a system message appeared before Gilroshan. He had successfully subdued the back alley bandits. The bandits pleaded desperately for their lives. As Gilroshan processed the system's reward, another message appeared. He had acquired a new skill, Warm Light, a healing ability. Carls and Sway congratulated him sincerely, praising his efforts. However, Gilroshan remained thoughtful, acknowledging inwardly that these bandits were insignificant compared to Marquis Lon Loit. If he wanted to survive, his strength needed to grow much faster. Carls then asked what should be done with the two bandits still captured. One of them begged Gilroshan to spare him, promising to live as though already dead if granted mercy. Gilroshan frowned, recognizing the common mistake of beginners. Releasing enemies often led to revenge. He turned to the bandits with a dangerous smile. They had already heard their leader address him as Highness, and he reminded them of this fact. With sharp authority, he declared himself the prince of the back alleys and demanded their loyalty. The bandits trembled, confused and afraid. One of them screamed when Gilroshan used his combat skill upon him. Carls rushed to intervene, distressed, and asked if such harshness had been necessary. Gilroshan noticed the worry in Carl's voice, yet he knew the damage was minimal. The blood was slight, and the bandit seemed to have fainted from shock alone. A system window explained that his offensive skill, Taste of Sadism, only created frightening visual effects while causing minimal harm. The same window revealed that the bandit had entered a state of fear. Pleading for his life, he swore he would do anything. Gilroshan smiled darkly and asked if he truly meant it. The bandit stammered agreement. Gilroshan reminded him of his name, Thompson, and ordered him to serve directly under him from now on. Thompson stuttered in disbelief, unable to comprehend being made subordinate to the so-called prince of the back alleys. Gilroshan dismissed his hesitation. He told him there was a place he needed to visit, and Thompson would act as his guide. Thompson asked nervously where they were going. Gilroshan replied that they would head deeper into the back alleys and that they were already late. He urged Thompson mockingly to hurry. Chapter 17. Gilroshan walked alongside his companions, eating a sandwich with visible delight. He turned to Thompson and remarked on how delicious it was, asking where it had come from. Thompson replied with pride that his mother had prepared it and confidently stated she was one of the best cooks in all of Orex. Suddenly, Gilroshan's expression hardened and he struck Thompson on the head with the sandwich, leaving him shocked and confused. Thompson winced in pain and asked why he had been hit. Gilroshan, clearly frustrated, explained that Thompson's happiness over his mother's care was simply too irritating. With quiet bitterness, he added that he had never experienced such affection from his own mother. His words left the group staring at him in silence. Sway broke the stillness and pointed out that he did indeed have a mother, the Empress. Gilroshan froze as if struck, caught off guard by the reminder. His mind clouded with exhaustion as he muttered that things were becoming too complicated. He was burdened enough dealing with matters involving his father, the Emperor, and now the Empress had been brought into the discussion as well. He wondered uneasily whether this play he was trapped in was finally drawing to an end. The group eventually arrived at the gates of the black market. Thompson pointed toward the entrance and said that this was the place he had spoken of earlier. He asked anxiously if he could leave now. Gilroshan shook his head and clarified that he had not brought Thompson as a guide to navigate the way. The reason was that entrance to the black market required a special invitation, and Thompson was the key to securing it. Gilroshan then instructed everyone to use different names and titles within the black market so his identity as the prince of the back alleys would remain hidden. Turning to Thompson, he ordered him to lead the way. Thompson trembled with fear, wondering how someone like him was supposed to smuggle others into the black market. He knew that attempting such a thing without permission could easily result in punishment. Gilroshan pressed him firmly, telling him to stop hesitating and assuring him nothing bad would happen under his watch. Despite his nerves, Thompson knocked on the door lightly. Sway mocked his weak effort and asked if he had forgotten how to eat properly, judging by the lack of strength in his knock. With no reply from inside, Thompson nervously suggested they return later. Gilroshan sighed in boredom, ignored the advice, and stepped forward to pound heavily on the door himself. Thompson grew increasingly frantic, warning him that such behavior could cause serious trouble. Before long, a small window in the door slid open and an angry voice thundered at Thompson, asking if he wanted to die. Thompson panicked and stammered that it was him, Thompson. The unseen man demanded to know who Thompson was. Thompson explained that he was the new recruit from the Western District and had brought a guest. After a moment of hesitation, the voice mocked him, asking if he was that rookie named Thompson. When he confirmed, the door burst open. A massive man stepped out, glaring down at Thompson with fury. He scolded him harshly, accusing him of being reckless and fearless in the worst sense. He berated him for daring to bring a guest into the black market when he was still a rookie, questioning whether he had a death wish and demanding to know who had trained him so poorly. Thompson stammered desperately, trying to explain that the situation was not what it looked like. Gilroshan intervened, his tone calm and composed. He asked the large man why he was wasting time scolding Thompson instead of welcoming him as a paying customer. Then he remarked coldly that if the man cared so little for money, perhaps they had come to the wrong place. The large man stared at Gilroshan, eyes narrowing as he studied him. Without waiting for further insult, Gilroshan tossed a heavy pouch at his feet. Gilroshan smiled faintly and asked if that sum would be sufficient to pay the entrance fee. The man picked up the pouch, opened it, and his eyes widened at the sight of 30 gold coins. He was stunned by the generosity of the offer, realizing such a large amount was far beyond any reasonable entrance fee. His demeanor shifted instantly. He handed the pouch back respectfully, explaining that the black market did not charge entrance fees, only that they valued trustworthy customers. Gilroshan smirked, pleased to hear it, and remarked that this meant he had just saved money. He asked politely if they could enter now. The large man quickly welcomed him, his hostility replaced with courtesy. Gilroshan, inwardly amused, thought to himself that the man probably mistook him for a naive noble he could take advantage of later. Gilroshan then suggested Thompson serve as their guide inside the black market. Thompson grew pale and tried to refuse, claiming he was not capable. However, the large man placed a firm grip on his shoulder and, in a calm yet menacing tone, ordered him to do his best. Fear surged through Thompson, and he agreed immediately. The group passed through the gates as the man officially welcomed them into the black market. Sway gazed around in awe. She marveled that such a place could exist hidden behind a simple door. The bustling stalls stretched endlessly, alive with merchants, customers, and strange creatures. Carls commented that it resembled a giant ant's nest before correcting himself and addressing Gilroshan respectfully. Thompson, trembling, asked where Gilroshan wanted to go. Gilroshan answered calmly that their destination was obvious, the upper floor. Thompson panicked, explaining that he was a mere rookie who lacked permission to reach the upper floor, and he did not even know the way. Sway, filled with excitement, told him not to worry. She darted ahead, insisting that the magic was calling her and they needed to hurry. The group followed her through aisles of unusual goods. They passed cages containing strange beasts and displays of items that radiated unnatural energy. At one auction, a rare two-headed ghoul was being showcased as a prize specimen. They also came across a vast water tank filled with bizarre aquatic creatures. Through the crowded market, a guiding voice urged them toward the right direction. Eventually, Sway stopped before a towering gate. She announced with trembling excitement that a powerful magical aura radiated from this place. Carls, however, reminded her calmly that their purpose here was to prepare for the coming catastrophe, not to lose themselves in wonder. Sway looked torn, caught between desire and duty. Gilroshan stepped forward with a small smile and revealed he had prepared a magical item as a gift for her. Sway's eyes widened in shock and joy, asking if he had truly done this. Gilroshan confirmed, explaining that he had felt guilty after seeing how upset she had been before. For a moment, he thought to himself that although she usually acted mature, right now she looked like an ordinary 19-year-old girl. Sway erupted in excitement and declared she wanted to claim the item immediately before someone else did. Gilroshan sighed inwardly, wishing she would at least pretend to be touched by his effort. He gently reminded her to calm herself, warning that their plan would fail if she lost control of her emotions, and in that case, the magical item would slip out of reach. His words surprised Sui. Gilroshan soothed her further, telling her that there was no need to worry excessively and urging her once again to keep her composure. She inhaled deeply, focused, and within moments regained complete control of herself. Gilroshan was impressed, astonished by how quickly she could master her emotions. Sui smiled gently and assured him she was calm now. Elsewhere, Marquis Elon stood before the emperor, who glared down at him with icy fury. The emperor demanded he repeat the words he had just spoken, his anger filling the chamber like a crushing weight. Chapter 18. Marquis Elon knelt before the emperor, speaking with controlled calm as he delivered troubling news. He explained that the third prince, Gilroshan, had left for the capital of the revolutionaries with the bold claim that he would retrieve the Tear of Dawn. The emperor's expression twisted into mockery. He repeated the report with scorn, saying it made the prince sound as though he were embarking on a sacred mission, and he ridiculed the absurdity of it. Marquis Elon, however, did not waver. He firmly confirmed that his words were the truth and clarified that the prince's actions were motivated by his desire to recover a valuable imperial artifact. The emperor's face darkened before he suddenly broke into a terrifying fit of laughter that echoed across the hall. The laughter was not of amusement but of cruel mockery, and it sent a sharp tension through the chamber. Marquis Elon felt a cold unease spread within him as he waited for the emperor's next reaction. The emperor eventually stopped laughing, his gaze narrowing on Marquis Elon with anger. He demanded to know if the Marquis had come only to entertain him with such nonsense. His sharp tone demanded an immediate answer. Marquis Elon replied with composure, stating that everything he had reported was precisely as he knew it and that he had added nothing of his own. A heavy silence followed, then the emperor spoke quietly, allowing the Marquis to rise. Once Marquis Elon stood, the emperor continued with disdain. He declared that he did not doubt the Marquis's honesty, yet he still regarded Gilroshan as a useless son who now claimed to suffer from messenger syndrome. The emperor then summoned the head servant and asked for the location of the commander of the royal knights. The servant replied that the commander had just arrived and awaited the emperor's call. The emperor ordered that he be brought in at once. Soon, the commander of the royal knights entered the throne hall and knelt before the emperor. He was Shedrick Ben, the empire's spear. To Marquis Elon, this man was nothing more than the emperor's loyal hunting dog, famed for his blind devotion. The emperor gave his orders without hesitation. Shedrick Ben was to select the most skilled soldiers and place Gilroshan under strict surveillance. If the prince succeeded in retrieving the Tear of Dawn, he was to be brought immediately to the palace, and force could be used if he resisted. With chilling indifference, the emperor added that if Gilroshan died, his body should be recovered so the emperor himself could confirm whether the claim of messenger syndrome was true. He coldly remarked that it mattered little if his son lost a few limbs along the way. Shedrick Ben accepted the orders calmly, his loyalty unwavering. Marquis Elon, however, felt shock and disbelief coil in his chest. He wondered silently if the emperor had lost all reason, for Gilroshan was still his son. The emperor ended the meeting, dismissing them with a sharp command. Those present responded respectfully and departed. Marquis Elon left the hall burdened with worry. His thoughts turned to Gilroshan, who was now under the eyes of the emperor's hunters. He understood the urgency of delivering a warning to the prince, yet he was deeply troubled by how he could possibly reach him. Gilroshan was in Orex city under difficult conditions, and any attempt at contact would be perilous. Elsewhere, Gilroshan's group stepped into a grand hall that radiated wealth and majesty. The polished marble reflected the glow of enchanted lights, and banners bearing ancient symbols lined the towering walls. The magnificence of the place overwhelmed Sui, who paused to take it in. Her astonishment was clear as she whispered to herself about how the hall felt like another world. Gilroshan noticed her excitement and reminded her gently to remain calm. She quickly agreed and composed herself. Karl soon gestured toward a figure in the distance. He addressed Gilroshan by the title of Your Highness, warning him that someone familiar stood nearby. Gilroshan frowned and scolded Karls for speaking that title in such a place. Karls bowed his head and apologized nervously. He then identified the figure more clearly, pointing out Urgel, which startled everyone. None of them could understand why Urgel was there. Gilroshan stared at Urgel in irritation, wondering what business he could have in such a place. He likened Urgel's expression to that of a restless dog and decided he would rather not deal with him. He calmly told Karls that they would act as though they had not seen him. Thompson, however, asked with curiosity if Gilroshan knew Urgel. Gilroshan admitted that he did, though he added that their relationship was in an awkward state. Thompson stiffened as he realized that Urgel was approaching directly toward them. Urgel reached the group, wearing a strangely friendly expression that felt out of character. Gilroshan's irritation deepened, convinced this encounter would be unpleasant. Carl stepped forward, attempting to cut the meeting short by telling Ergel they were busy and had no time for conversation. Yet Ergel tried to stop them, asking for Gilroshan to wait. Carls quickly intervened again and warned him sternly not to use Gilroshan's name, for the prince's identity had to remain hidden. Ergel acknowledged this with a short nod. After a moment of silence, Ergel cautiously addressed Gilroshan, explaining that he had considered matters carefully and believed buying in bulk would yield greater profit. He proposed that they strike a deal together, reminding Gilroshan that they had once shared a moment of life and death. Gilroshan grew wary, doubting the sincerity of the offer. He was convinced Ergel had an ulterior motive. Maintaining politeness, he declined and explained that he preferred to manage his own business. He then made to leave, but Ergel leaned close and whispered that he had come to purchase the balance shield. The word struck Gilroshan. The balance shield was renowned among players, and he himself had come for the same item. He regarded Ergel with suspicion and asked if there was another reason for his presence. Ergel grew tense and accused Gilroshan of trying to provoke him into giving up. Gilroshan answered coolly that he did indeed plan to walk away. Ergel panicked, admitting reluctantly that he lacked money. Gilroshan mocked him silently and forced him to repeat it aloud. Flustered, Ergel declared that he was short on funds. Gilroshan smiled with cold amusement and asked directly how much money he carried. Ergel hesitated but eventually handed over 92 gold coins. A system message appeared in Gilroshan's vision, confirming the transfer to his personal inventory. Gilroshan accepted the coins with a calm smile and told Ergel he would acquire the balance shield for him. Ergel warned him not to attempt any deceit. Gilroshan assured him that he would honor his word but added that this favor would not come without a condition. He told Ergel that once they left the market, he must reveal his true identity. If Ergel disliked the demand, he could take back his money. Ergel agreed quickly but then addressed him as Shan. Gilroshan frowned in annoyance and asked what more he wanted. Ergel hesitated before asking if Gilroshan's teacher might be among his team. The unexpected question startled Gilroshan. For a moment, he was left confused, wondering if Ergel's goal was connected to the balance shield or perhaps to the children's death event. Suspicion grew as their eyes locked, sharp and probing. Gilroshan considered whether they were on the same mission. Ergel repeated his strange question once more, asking whether Gilroshan's teacher was already among his companions. Chapter 19. An idea lit up in Gilroshan's mind. He realized he could take advantage of the situation, retrieve the key, and simultaneously search for his teacher. Acting swiftly, he instructed Carls to find Master Carls and return to the reception desk. Gilroshan then leaned closer to Carls and whispered a request, telling him to confirm whether Master Carls could apply the expansion spell on the items he was carrying. Carls looked surprised and asked quietly how Gilroshan had managed to acquire the ability to use spatial magic. Gilroshan answered calmly, saying he had simply kept trying until he eventually succeeded. Carls could not hide his excitement and told him with pride that he was truly impressed. He even remarked that Gilroshan's teacher would have been proud to see such progress. Gilroshan, however, reflected silently that the spatial expansion spell, which had been awarded to him in Orex as a special reward, was seen in this place as nothing more than an ordinary inconvenient spell. What astonished him further was the realization that Prince Gil Rosen of the Magic Empire had only just begun learning it. Carls quickly announced that he would go immediately to fetch Master Carls. At the same time, a clerk from the marketplace approached Gilroshan and greeted him as a new customer. Gilroshan wasted no time and asked her directly about the price of the balance shield. The clerk replied that it was currently being sold for 120 gold coins. Gilroshan raised his brows in surprise. He remarked that the price just a while ago had been 110 gold coins, and he added that what she quoted now was 10 coins higher than what his companion had told him. The clerk smiled pleasantly and explained that the prices of magical items sold on the upper floor changed constantly depending on shifting circumstances. Gilroshan smirked to himself. He understood that when beginners like him came to the upper floor, two outcomes usually awaited them. Either they were scammed into paying far more than the true value, or they were lured into a rigged gambling match where they could lose everything, including their clothing. The clerk maintained her cheerful expression and asked Gilroshan if he was truly going to purchase the shield. Gilroshan reminded himself of the 3 items he needed to obtain here. The first was the rapid bow, the second was the silver ring of Rascal, and the third was the balance shield. Yet, he considered the situation carefully. If Ergel could not afford the shield with 92 gold coins, then how could he possibly purchase it with only 30? That thought confirmed what his instincts had already told him. He was standing in the very heart of a scam den. With that realization, he decided that it was time to scam the scammers. He told the clerk, wearing a sly smile, that he would indeed purchase the shield. However, he then asked curiously if they also sold the dice of death. The clerk's expression brightened instantly. She told him they did indeed sell it and revealed she had planned to recommend it to him as well. She then handed him a key and instructed him to proceed to room 3 on the same floor. The clerk thought confidently to herself that he would surely return after gambling, eager to buy the balance shield. At that moment, Gilroshan felt a sharp gaze pressing into his back. The sensation made him tense immediately. He soon realized that the burning stares came from his own companions. Sui's anger burst forth. She scolded him harshly, declaring that she had trusted him and followed him all the way to Orex, only to find him gambling. Her voice rose with fury as she accused him of returning to his past disgraceful ways of drinking and gambling. Gilroshan tried to calm her, assuring her the situation was not what she thought. He looked toward Carls for help, asking him to intervene, yet Carls turned away silently and offered no support. Gilroshan felt a pang of betrayal, never having expected Carls to doubt him as well. Despite his frustration, he reasoned inwardly that given the personality of the old prince he had once been, their reaction was understandable. He attempted once more to calm Sui, telling her to leave him alone. Sui, however, screamed with even greater fury, demanding Carls restrain him at once and declaring she would end this nonsense immediately. Sui stepped forward, yet Carls interjected calmly, suggesting that they should at least listen to what Gilroshan had to say before rejecting him outright. Sui hesitated briefly. Although still seething, she nodded slightly, agreeing to Carls's suggestion. This angered Gilroshan further, for they had ignored his words until Carls spoke up, after which they suddenly calmed. Nevertheless, Gilroshan gathered himself and addressed them directly. He reminded them that gambling meant placing a bet on something uncertain. However, he claimed his situation was different, for he was absolutely certain of his success. He asked plainly whether it could still be called gambling if he already knew the outcome. The group fell into silence. Carls eventually broke it, remarking that Gilroshan sounded exactly like a gambling addict. None of the others spoke. Gilroshan, unshaken, explained calmly that his method was reliable. He was not gambling for amusement but acting decisively to achieve their goal. He reminded them that he had killed the monster Gromhard and had already defeated Marquis Elon. He declared that he was now gathering the magical items necessary to stop the looming catastrophe threatening Orex. With full confidence, he told them this was the best path they could take. He urged them to trust him as they had done before, promising sincerely that this time he would change. Sui seemed convinced. A small smile appeared on her face as she admitted that if he phrased it that way, she had no choice but to trust him. Carl smiled faintly as well, showing calm acceptance of Gilroshan's words. Their moment was interrupted when Ergel approached. He addressed Gilroshan hesitantly, which irritated him at once. Gilroshan asked sharply if Ergel wanted his money back and no longer wished for the shield. Ergel grew nervous and stammered that it was nothing of importance. Gilroshan then announced to the group that if everyone was ready, they should proceed to the upper floor. Sui brightened instantly and expressed her admiration. She told Gilroshan enthusiastically that he had another plan and said proudly that he truly was her student. The gambling session began on the upper floor. Gilroshan faced a merchant woman across the table. After losing a round, she appeared unsettled, remarking that she usually relied on strong instincts and rarely suffered losses. She smiled despite her frustration and commented that it was rare for her to lose twice in a row, noting how extraordinary his luck seemed. Gilroshan studied her closely. He had intentionally lost twice earlier to provoke a reaction, but her composure did not break. His companions, however, grew visibly anxious. In contrast, he concluded silently that her clothing and mannerisms suggested she was not local. He wondered if she was feigning her calmness or if there was something deeper at play. Confidently, Gilroshan declared that he felt at his best today and suggested they raise the stakes. The merchant appeared startled and asked for a moment to consider. Within her thoughts, she rejoiced secretly, mocking his overconfidence. She told herself no matter what he tried, he could never overcome her. She smiled darkly, convinced that she, Hiron, would strip him of all his wealth and enslave both him and his companions. Meanwhile, Carls and Sui looked increasingly worried, mistaking her strange expressions for signs of illness or despair. Carls suggested gently to Gilroshan that perhaps they should not raise the stakes, since the merchant looked as though she might be crying. Gilroshan ignored their concern internally, noting that if he displayed weakness here, this place would devour him completely. The merchant suddenly gave a strange smile and apologized, claiming she had only felt as though she was about to sneeze. Sui pitied her immediately, calling her unfortunate, and Carls shared the same sympathy. The merchant then turned back to Gilroshan with a sly smile. She remarked that he had not seemed very excited earlier because the stakes were too low. She assured him not to worry, since the money was not hers, and encouraged him to name any amount he wished. Gilroshan's confidence grew even further. She urged him to set his price without hesitation. Internally, Gilroshan smirked. He thought to himself that she truly did not know him. He had always been able to overturn situations against her kind. He decided the moment was perfect to raise the stakes to the maximum. Gilroshan smiled with full confidence. He resolved to go all in. Chapter 20. Gilroshan stood before the magical board as a glowing message appeared, explaining the rules of the game they were about to play. The game was called Dice of Death, a seemingly simple board game of moving pieces, collecting treasures, and returning to the starting point. Although it resembled a regular board game, Gilroshan understood that this place specialized in enchanted items, and every tool within its walls carried magic. He carefully reviewed the rules. The objective was clear: collect treasures, complete a full loop, and return to the starting point. A player could move their piece according to the dice roll, even moving backward if needed. However, only an exact roll that matched the remaining steps would allow a player to return successfully. The challenge grew more complex because players could influence each other's progress with clever dice rolls and calculated movements. Yet Gilroshan knew this would not trouble him. What made the game unique was the enchanted die itself. It did not follow randomness, but rather a fixed repeating sequence. He smiled quietly to himself, remembering that he had already memorized the pattern of every result. Calmly, Gilroshan asked the clerk if magical items could be wagered instead of gold. Hoyoon, the elegant yet deceitful attendant, gave a pleasant smile and confirmed that it was allowed. She asked him which items he wanted to stake. Gilroshan replied confidently that he wished to bet 2 units of the balance shield, along with the forest bracelet and a bundle of swift arrows. His request left Hoyoon visibly surprised. An employee nearby reminded him that the rules only allowed 3 items to be wagered. He asked Gilroshan if that was acceptable. Hoyoon immediately called the employee closer and whispered harshly in his ear. She reminded him that her job was to lure customers and strip them of their wealth, while his role was to clean up afterward. She declared with venom that she would never lose and threatened to sell him as a slave if he spoiled her plan. Terrified, the employee obeyed and hurried off to fetch the requested items. Hoyoon turned back to Gilroshan, wearing once again her pleasant mask. She assured him the items would be ready shortly and politely asked him to show how much gold he possessed, calling it a formality. Gilroshan signaled Carls, who immediately placed 2 pouches of gold on the table. The weight of the pouches and the heavy clinking sound startled Hoyoon, for they contained nearly 650 coins. She marveled silently at who these people could be, but her heart darkened as she decided that if they lacked sufficient gold, she would have ensnared them in crushing debt and sold them off without hesitation. The employee soon returned with the items. Hoyoon smiled warmly and announced that everything was ready, telling Gilroshan he could begin. Gilroshan, however, asked her to go first, claiming he was still new to the game and uncertain of the flow. Amused, Hoyoon picked up the die with confidence and rolled it. Gilroshan's sharp eyes followed the motion and he calculated that the die would land on 2. He analyzed the situation. If she rolled 5, she would collect 50 gold coins, but her strategy required a slower pace. She could not allow the game to end quickly, or the entire scheme would collapse. Her plan was to let him taste small victories, gain hope, and then crush him at the peak of his anticipation. It was a method of blending joy with despair and ending it with bitter regret. Yet when the die stopped, it showed 6. Hoyoon froze, stunned by the unexpected result. Gilroshan's gaze grew colder as he noticed her feigned smile. She attempted to excuse herself by saying the air in the room was dry, but he saw clearly through her nervousness. Calmly, he took the die for his turn. Her next roll brought 3, which aligned with her expectations, and she visibly regained composure. Gilroshan noticed that 50 gold coins sat only a step away from his piece. He could have taken them, but deliberately chose not to. Instead, he left them untouched, showing calculated restraint. Carls and Sway stood by his side, urging him on with exaggerated encouragement, saying he needed to roll the dice with passion. Their enthusiasm embarrassed Gilroshan slightly, for he was merely acting. Hoyoon smirked and reassured him not to worry, claiming the gold would be his soon enough. She rolled again with confidence, but to her shock, the die landed on 2 instead of the expected 5. Her piece stopped exactly on the 50 gold coins she had prepared as bait. The tension in the room rose, and every gaze turned to her faltering composure. Gilroshan smirked again, realizing she had been forced into her own trap. Inside his mind, he explained the method he had mastered. Memorizing the pattern was simple, but controlling the result required finesse. It depended on how the die was held and released. He had disrupted the natural sequence by adjusting his throw, causing the die to skip forward in its cycle. This misdirection was a technique known among seasoned players. He wondered briefly why Urgel, the mysterious man who had once defeated the monster Gromheart, seemed unaware of such methods. Gilroshan then remembered the shield promised by Urgel and decided that once he obtained it, he would reveal his true identity as he had vowed. For now, he declared inwardly that it was time to end the charade and defeat Hoyoon completely. The next move sealed the outcome. Gilroshan won, leaving the employee announcing in disbelief that he had just claimed the balance shield. The crowd stared in astonishment, unable to process the sudden victory. Sui threw her arms around him, overjoyed, and declared triumph through sheer excitement. Carl smiled proudly by his side. Urgel approached quietly, asking with unusual hesitation for the shield. Gilroshan found the man's behavior strange, not matching his usual confident demeanor. Hoyoon, however, composed herself quickly, masking her fury with a mysterious smile. She congratulated Gilroshan with unsettling calmness and invited him to continue if he wished. Gilroshan accepted boldly, proclaiming that 4 was the perfect number. He rolled with ease, his piece advancing smoothly across the board as though guided by fate. He declared it his lucky day and leaned back with confidence as his strategy unfolded flawlessly. Hoyoon remained seated across from him, her outward calm strained by the mounting frustration hidden beneath her smile. Her repeated defeats weighed heavily on her composure, and though her lips curled into a pleasant shape, her eyes betrayed anger and plotting malice. The game continued, but Gilroshan had already dismantled her mask, exposing her weakness. The scene closed on Hoyoon's chilling expression, her sinister smile revealing a growing storm of vengeance as her gaze burned with concealed hatred. Gilroshan, however, sat calmly, his mind already 3 steps ahead, for the board was no longer hers to control. Chapter 21. Sean understood that there were a total of 8 treasures at stake in the game. Hoyoon had already claimed the first one, yet she showed no suspicion that Sean was influencing the dice. He predicted that her mind might instead linger on the possibility that something was wrong with the dice themselves. If the dice were being tampered with, there would have been no reason for Sean to hand over 50 gold to her earlier. From a certain perspective, he was simply using her own tricks against her, turning the table on her plans. Hoyoon's expression grew more displeased as the game continued, with 6 treasures remaining on the table. Sean resolved to claim them all for himself, a confident smile playing on his lips as he felt that the day was favoring him. Each roll seemed to fall exactly where he wanted, almost as if fate itself was pushing the dice into place. As Sean's piece advanced further, Hoyoon's disbelief became evident. Sui, on the other hand, was thrilled to witness her student's remarkable progress. The onlookers in the room began to suspect that something strange was occurring, yet Carl's managed to keep most of them under control. Sean commented lightly, feigning guilt for winning so easily, claiming that the dice appeared possessed. His playful teasing, however, did little to disturb Hoyoon, who strained to maintain a composed face. Determined to uncover the truth, Hoyoon picked up the dice and examined them carefully. Sean's words pressed her, questioning whether she believed the dice to be unusual. Dismissing his insinuations, Hoyoon rolled them anyway. The outcome left her in a troublesome position, too deeply involved in the game to simply withdraw. Sean, realizing this, decided to quicken the pace and rolled his own dice without hesitation. By the end, victory was once again his, and the frustration etched on Hoyoon's face was unmistakable. Carls and Sui praised Sean openly, declaring him a genius in gambling, while even Thompson voiced his admiration. Their enthusiasm provoked Hoyoon's anger, and she shouted at them to silence themselves. She insisted that this was a game she could never lose. According to her, Sean's supposed method of rolling with his heart was nothing but nonsense. Her expression twisted into something monstrous as she declared repeatedly that defeat was impossible for her. If she lost, then it only meant that the game itself had been manipulated. In response, Sean demonstrated what a rigged game truly looked like. He took her dice and rolled it, claiming her next roll would land on 1. As he predicted, the dice revealed exactly that number. Hoyoon's fury erupted, and she cursed him, demanding to know how he managed to cheat despite being aware that the dice were rigged. Sean admitted without hesitation that he had cheated, but he pointed out that the dice had been tampered with from the very beginning. All he had done was restore balance to a game that was already corrupted. Thanking her for the loot, he prepared to leave, yet Hoyoon blocked his way. She refused to accept his victory, insisting that he had not won fairly. Rising from her seat with a devilish smile, she called him naive and revealed that her men were already waiting outside. With tears gathering in her eyes, she repeated her belief that she had not lost. Sean regarded her as pathetic, remarking that after losing, the least she could do was remain silent. He acknowledged that he was aware of her goons from the start, having predicted that she would never allow him to walk away with victory. Surprised by his foresight, Hoyoon questioned how he could have known the outcome from the beginning. Sean, however, ignored her and turned his attention to Thompson, who appeared visibly troubled. Thompson feared that once Sean departed, the consequences would fall upon him. Sean reassured him that he would not allow such a thing to happen. He instructed Thompson to open the door when he received the signal. Hiron's fury erupted again, and she ordered her guards to seize Sean and his companions. At that moment, Urgel appeared with his lightning sword, warning the goons not to interfere unless they wished to die. The guards immediately recognized the weapon as a sword spirit, though Hiron remained oblivious. She commanded them to attack, but they refused. One soldier boldly declared that if anyone should die, it ought to be her. Hiron was struck speechless as the guard explained further that they were not her slaves and did not answer to her authority directly. Grateful for Urgel's intervention, Sean reminded him to keep up or risk being left behind. Urgel joined them quickly, though Thompson's worry still lingered. He reminded Sean of his earlier promise to spare him, yet Sean mischievously denied it. Thompson was shocked, only to realize that Sean was joking. Sean assured him that a protective shield was already surrounding him, guaranteeing his safety. Thompson relaxed somewhat and was instructed to open the door. The moment the door swung open, they were confronted by a group of armed men. These goons recognized Thompson immediately, calling him a rookie and claiming they had seen his face before. Thompson attempted to deny it, but others in the group shouted his name openly. Confusion deepened when someone asked why he was glowing. The protective spell surrounding him extended outward, attaching itself to the goons. Bewildered, they demanded an explanation from Thompson, but he could provide none. Their anger grew, and a massive man wielding a hammer threatened to kill him unless he spoke the truth. From inside the room, Hiron screamed again, accusing Sean and his group of cheating and attempting to escape. Thompson looked back desperately, his eyes pleading for help. Sean calmly gave Carls the signal to act. Carls struck Thompson with his shield, sending him flying forward through the mass of goons. The enemies outside were left in shock as Thompson's body crashed into them. Their confusion deepened when the strange glow spread across their ranks. They could not understand what was happening to their bodies, while Thompson, propelled through them, remained dazed and powerless. Chapter 22. Minutes earlier, Carls reminded Sean of the goons swarming outside and asked if they really had time to waste on conversations. Sean calmly explained that the room was completely soundproof, so no one outside would hear anything, not even if someone were to die inside. Sway then questioned if Sean had already planned a way for them to escape. Sean reassured her by pointing out that Carls was a 6-star knight and Sway herself was a 7-star witch. With their combined abilities, they had little reason to worry. Carls, however, raised a valid concern. Breaking through the entrance might be possible, yet holding off repeated waves of enemies would prove difficult. Sean responded that they were not relying only on themselves. He mentioned that they had another person in their group. Carls immediately assumed Sean referred to Urgel and voiced concerns about Urgel's identity and the possibility of betrayal. Sean corrected him, saying he was speaking about Thompson instead. Both Carls and Sway expressed disbelief, insisting that Thompson lacked the skill to contribute in a fight. They argued that he would be safer staying behind in the room. Sean agreed that Thompson was not skilled enough to battle the goons, yet he insisted that they would take him along regardless. Whether they were caught or not, Thompson would accompany them. Sean added with confidence that Thompson would not slow them down. In fact, they might even struggle to keep up with him. Shocked, Carls and Sway demanded to know how that could be possible. Sean then began to explain his plan. He first asked Thompson directly if he was a member of the Black Society. Thompson admitted that he was, though he clarified that his position was low-ranked. Sway, hearing this, asked what the Black Society was, since Hiron had mentioned it earlier. Carls took the opportunity to explain. He said that the underworld of Orex was divided between two major groups. The first was the Chivalric League, self-proclaimed vigilantes who often broke the law in the name of justice. The second was the Black Society, a group driven entirely by profit. They were known to run black markets, deal in slave trading, and control illegal gambling operations. As Carls explained, Sean observed how sharp he was. Sean recalled his father's words, realizing that without such intelligence, Carls would never have advanced as far as he did. Sean then turned to Sway and asked about the bracelet she wore. She explained that it was a green elf artifact that boosted wood element magic. It contained the root shield spell, which strengthened magical formations and maximized defensive power. Sean instructed her to cast that spell on Thompson, as much as her mana would allow. Sway was reluctant, asking why she should exhaust her mana on a single defensive spell for one person. That would mean no one else would receive any defensive reinforcement, which defeated the purpose of the spell. Sean explained further, since the spell amplified density and cohesion, maximizing that effect on a single target would create defense on an entirely different level. When the density peaked, enemies attempting to resist would be overwhelmed. Hearing this, Sui realized that Sean's idea was brilliant. Even so, Carls argued that there was no need to waste such effort and mana if their only concern was breaking through the entrance guards. Sean replied that the spell was not meant just for that. He reminded Carls of his shield, which contained a spell that repelled whatever it struck. All Carls needed to do was strike Thompson, sending him rolling forward. A terrified Thompson listened as Sean elaborated. As he rolled, he would draw the attention of the Black Society members, pulling them in as though magnetized. Carls and Sui both wore the same horrified expression, confirming to Sean that they understood the strategy. For Sean, this was one of his favorite plans. As a veteran player, he often grew attached to strategies he developed himself. When the time came for execution, the plan unfolded as expected. Thompson, along with the other Black Society members, was bound together within the rolling defense ball. Hoyoon, trapped among them, screamed endlessly and vowed revenge against Sean. As Sean and his companions approached the rolling cluster of enemies for the final act, Carls appeared uneasy. Sean asked the reason, and Carls admitted he worried about injuring Thompson and the others trapped inside. Sean reassured him that the spell was fueled by the mana of a 7-star witch. No matter how hard he struck, none of the occupants inside would be harmed. Relieved, Carls approached the ball, where Hoyoon's head protruded slightly. Hoyoon mocked him, warning that running upstairs would not save them and that none of them would leave the black market alive. Carls finally lost his patience and decided to strike with full force. Hoyoon muttered that he was insane, but Carls did not hesitate. With all his strength, Carls hit the ball. It rolled forward at immense speed, crashing down the stairs. The first gate shattered under its momentum, and the guards stationed there were flung aside without resistance. The ball continued its rampage as more goons caught sight of it. Initially, they assumed it to be some sort of magical prank. However, the trapped members inside cried out warnings, urging them to flee. Before they could react, Sean and his companions took advantage of the confusion, leaping upon the distracted guards and knocking them out swiftly. More groups of enemies appeared, yet Urgel cut them down with ease. The rolling defense ball plowed ahead, clearing out everything in its path until it reached the last gate. At that gate, a massive man fumbled nervously as he tried to open it. The moment he managed, the ball smashed through, crushing him instantly. Sean and his group stepped over the man's body and retrieved Thompson, who was nauseous and looked close to collapsing. Sean carried him out, remarking that the Black Society would pursue them as soon as they recovered. At this point, Urgel declared it was time for them to part ways. He asked Sean where he planned to lay low, since the Black Society was known for its persistence. Suspicion flickered across Sean's face, but Urgel clarified that he was only offering advice. Sean answered that he would be heading to the Cold Sun Tavern. Urgel approved, explaining that if Sean gave the owner his name, he would be provided with a free room. Sean then asked Urgel to inform Vamilo of their location so that he could meet them there. Urgel agreed and bid them farewell. Before departing, he smirked and told Sean that next time they met, they would discuss something else entirely. Sean was caught off guard by the remark, but before he could respond, Urgel vanished. Standing on a nearby fence, Urgel whispered his thanks to Sean and expressed his hope that they would meet again. Meanwhile, Sean felt as though he had forgotten something important. The realization struck him suddenly, and he shouted Thompson's name. Chapter 23. A short while later, Thompson was offered water, and after drinking, his breathing steadied. He expressed gratitude to Sean, saying he felt much better. Sean apologized for putting him through such strain, admitting he had not expected the side effects to be so severe. Thompson, however, refused the apology. He insisted that Sean had saved him from the goons because if he had been left behind, he would have lost a limb or worse. Even though he had originally approached with hostile intentions, Sean and the others had shown concern for him, and for that, he gave thanks. In his sincerity, he offered to serve Sean as his attendant. Sean considered the offer excessive and instead suggested that they simply travel together for the time being. At that moment, the system window declared that Thompson had officially joined the party. Sean advised that once Thompson regained enough strength, they should leave immediately. The goons of the Black Society would soon awaken from their unconscious state, and pursuit was inevitable. Sean noticed a particular expression on Carl's face and asked what troubled him. Carls explained that he was overcome with happiness, proud to witness how much Sean had grown. Sean then noticed Sui's eyes glistening with emotion, and he understood why they reacted that way, remembering the kind of person the young prince had once been. Their journey soon brought them to the Cold Sun Tavern. Thompson hesitated outside and asked if he could remain elsewhere. Knowing that many of the tavern's patrons were city guards, Sean understood why Thompson, a former member of the Black Society, felt uneasy. Still, Sean reassured him that no harm would come to him as long as he remained in their company. He then confessed openly that they themselves were fugitives who had escaped from the underground prison. Carl and Sway, hearing this, seemed to have forgotten the fact, and Sean reminded them not to group him with their situation. Despite the seriousness of his words, Sean noticed no tension within the group. The two quests tied to him were closely linked, and revolutionary elements outside the Eolim Church regarded him as a subversive threat. If he was not careful, he could be executed before ever reaching the chance to prevent the impending catastrophe. Sean decided to end the subject there, assuring the others that Vamilo would soon join them. Before entering the tavern, he asked Sway to place a disguise spell on his eyes, since they stood out too clearly. Once inside, they found the place crowded, likely because the night shift of the city guard had just ended. Sean offered thanks to the guards for their service to the city and pulled up a chair. The tavern owner instructed them to sit wherever they liked but reminded them to keep their voices low because the patrons were tired. Sean apologized, blaming their excitement on earning good money. A moment later, the owner returned with mugs of beer and steaming food. Sean gave a sign of approval for the fine service. The atmosphere shifted slightly when the owner studied them and remarked that they looked unfamiliar. He also noted Sean's accent, saying it was unusual. He introduced himself as a former member of the city guard, once known by the title Bloodhound. He claimed that his nose had not failed him, and he sensed something suspicious about them. The remark made Thompson's chest tighten with fear, and tension rose at the table. Carl quietly prepared himself to draw his weapon should matters escalate. The owner slammed a hand against the table, which caused Sean to act quickly. Sean rose and explained that he was from the port city of Haranex and had just arrived from the south with a few like-minded mercenaries. Hearing this, the owner relaxed and flexed his arm proudly, pleased with his ability to detect things accurately. He claimed he had recognized the scent of the sea upon them and praised himself for his sharpness. Other guards in the room urged him to stop bothering the strangers, yet he turned on them with playful threats, boasting that in his days with the city guard, none of them could meet his gaze directly. Sean observed the man with quiet thought. This was Lucard, once the captain of the city guard and among Sean's favorite non-player characters. After retiring, Lucard had opened this tavern in the slums to maintain order, and because of his straightforward character, the place had become both a gathering spot and a forward base for the guards. If Sean could deceive Lucard, hiding in the tavern would offer them the safest refuge. Lucard's sharp gaze then turned toward Thompson. He asked if they had met before, which caused Thompson to stammer nervously. Doubt began to spread among the others, questioning whether Thompson was trustworthy. Sean quickly stepped in, praising Lucard's keen sense as a true bloodhound. He admitted that Thompson was indeed once part of the Black Society, though he lacked courage and was often beaten and tossed around by them. That was precisely why Sean had recruited him into his mercenary band, intending to help him grow into a capable man. Lucard remained unconvinced, declaring that rules were rules and that Thompson should be arrested immediately. Tears welled in Thompson's eyes at the thought, only for Lucard to break into laughter, revealing it had been a jest. He extended his hand to Thompson, who shook it gratefully. They exchanged names, and Lucard assured him that he could come to him for help whenever needed. Gratitude spread across Thompson's face, and the kindness touched the hearts of the guards present. Sean chose that moment to interject, breaking the mood deliberately. He asked if they had heard of Urgel. Sean expressed frustration that Urgel had disappeared without explaining who he truly was, even after going through the effort of winning him a shield. To his surprise, Lucard shook his head and said he had never heard of anyone named Urgel. He speculated that Urgel might have been another runaway from the Black Society, not unlike Thompson. Realization dawned on Sean that he had been tricked. Urgel had scammed him, vanishing without leaving behind anything but a trail of questions. Chapter 24. Sean sat in his room, his thoughts circling back to the incident at the tavern. He clearly remembered the strange interaction between Urgel and Lucard. He had been convinced that the two knew each other, yet Lucard had shown no sign of recognition. That inconsistency weighed heavily on his mind. Sean questioned why Urgel would lie in the first place since there seemed to be no benefit for him to do so. The thought gnawed at him as he replayed earlier conversations with Carl and Sway. Carl had claimed that Urgel's movements revealed more than he intended. When Urgel left the tavern, he had used a technique that Carl immediately recognized as the Dance of Arrows, a unique skill passed down only in the southern principality of Weiler. To most people, it would appear as nothing more than agile footwork, but to someone who knew the origins of combat techniques, it was unmistakable. Sean realized that Carl might be right. The Dance of Arrows was tied to an A-ranked skill known as Assassin of Dawn, a power belonging to a rare fate card. That particular card could only be obtained as a reward from Weiler's ducal house quests. Sui, always sharp and curious, asked Sean if Weiler was a vassal state of the Valt Empire. Sean confirmed that she was correct. This realization raised more questions. Urgel had clearly spent an extraordinary amount of time building power within the Empire's faction, most likely to acquire the assassin of Don Card. Yet suddenly, he appeared within the Revolution faction. The contradiction suggested that Urgel was hiding something important. Sean considered it dangerous, though Sui was less concerned. She told him not to obsess over it and steered the conversation elsewhere. She then startled him with an unexpected question. She asked whether he truly had the prophet syndrome. Sean froze, taken aback by her words. Sui explained that she had heard it directly from the Marquis and that recent events strongly supported the rumor. She stressed that while preventing calamities and saving lives mattered, her greatest priority was ensuring that her student remained alive. Carl supported her, voicing the same concern, and asked Sean to be honest about whether he truly had the syndrome. Sean told them it was not really the prophet syndrome, though the truth was far more complicated. Their curiosity grew, urging him to explain, but just as he prepared to reveal the truth, Sui stopped him. She placed her hands over his and told him to keep his secrets. Everyone, including herself, carried secrets of their own. As long as his condition was not the prophet syndrome, that was enough for her. Her words reminded Sean that Sui herself kept parts of her identity concealed. She then encouraged him to lean on them whenever the burden became too heavy, assuring him that they would always have his back. For the first time in a long while, Sean felt a faint sense of relief. A small comfort stirred within him, likely tied to the fact that he had grown up as an orphan, facing the world entirely alone. Later that night, Sean lay in his bed, realizing how long it had been since he had rested on something so comfortable and eaten a proper meal. He thought about the strangeness of his existence. He had not even been in this world for a full month, yet reality already felt impossibly distant. This place felt too real to be just a game and too unreal to be true life. As those thoughts weighed on him, a system window appeared before his eyes, displaying his name and rank. The sudden knock on his door broke his train of thought. Sean immediately assumed a defensive stance, prepared to draw his sword. When he called out, the visitor identified himself, revealing it to be Lucard. Lucard informed him that someone downstairs was asking for him. Relieved, Sean relaxed and told him that he would be down shortly. Descending the stairs, Sean found Vamilo waiting for him. He remarked that Vamilo had arrived earlier than expected. Vamilo, however, quickly asked why Sean was alone. Sean explained that Sui was replenishing her mana while Carl and Thompson had gone out to gather supplies. Vamilo admitted he was not familiar with Thompson but did not press further. Instead, he handed Sean the item he had promised. He made it clear that it was only a loan and expected it to be returned afterward. Sean accepted the deal, though he could not say how long he would be borrowing the item. He brought out the glasses and placed them on, jokingly asking Vamilo how he looked. Vamilo, clearly irritated, told him not to ask such things since he already had enough to worry about. He then handed Sean a set of forged identification papers, instructing him and his companions to use the names written on them. Sean looked over the documents and agreed that the new names and the idea of posing as siblings worked well enough. However, he questioned why Carl was designated as the eldest while he was written as the youngest. Vamilo dismissed his complaint, reminding him that he was still a fugitive. Regardless of how much his appearance had changed, he could not risk fighting or drawing the attention of the city guard. Using the tavern as a gathering point had already been a bold and dangerous choice. Vamilo admitted he had not expected Sean and his companions to turn it into an advantage. Sean thanked him for the papers, though Vamilo pointed out that their new identities had already been entered into the registry. This meant that they were officially listed to attend the upcoming red wine rite. The Archbishop was deeply concerned about the disaster looming over the ceremony, and Vamilo admitted he shared that concern. Sean, however, declared that he fully intended to attend the rite and that when disaster struck, he would be the one to stop it. Vamilo attempted to reason with him, but Sean refused to waver. He insisted that he would not allow anyone to die, not even the priest responsible for orchestrating the events to come. Faced with Sean's determination, Vamilo finally conceded, choosing to trust his resolve. Sean offered to buy him a meal before he left, but Vamilo declined, claiming he was already overwhelmed with too much work. Just before leaving, Vamilo delivered one last message, this one from Urgel. Sean immediately assumed that Urgel was attempting to deceive him once again. However, Vamilo revealed that Urgel's true name was Eve Weiler. The revelation left Sean stunned. He recognized the name instantly. Eve Weiler of the Weiler Principality, renowned as the genius noble lady, was known both for her intelligence and beauty. She was the granddaughter of Duke Weiler himself. Her story within the records told of her capture by rival forces during the fracture of the Alliance arc, after which she vanished without a trace. The revelation not only shocked Sean because of her noble identity but also because it meant that Urgel had been a girl all along. Despite all his reasoning and analysis, he had never once considered that possibility. Chapter 25. Sean knew that some characters within this world carried fates that could not be overturned, no matter how much effort was poured into them. Eve Weiler was one such character. She was destined to die regardless of circumstances, her path sealed by the system of this world. Yet despite the inevitability of her end, she had captured the admiration of many. Eve possessed extraordinary beauty, formidable strength, and a close bond with her grandfather, along with an unyielding will to survive. Her dual role as an assassin granted her a mysterious allure that players found fascinating. It was this complexity that made her immensely popular, with countless players from the real world tirelessly searching for ways to save her from her predetermined fate. Sean, however, pondered something different. His mind lingered on the strange case of Urgel. He questioned how Urgel could become Eve Weiler, or perhaps whether it was the other way around. If Urgel had possessed the body of an NPC and arrived in this world before him, then he might have gained access to a disguise item, hiding his true nature. More troubling was the thought that Eve herself might not simply be an NPC at all, but rather someone like Sean, possessing the body of one. If that were true, then there could be many others scattered across this world, individuals from the real world inhabiting NPCs in secret. This unsettling possibility gnawed at Sean. If others existed who had arrived the same way, they might hold the key to understanding why he had been drawn into this world. Yet there was no guarantee they would not stand as his enemies instead. As he wrestled with these thoughts, Vamilo's calm voice cut through his contemplation. Vamilo warned him to exercise caution. Very few knew her as Eve Weiler, he explained. Her true and official name within this realm was Eve Lugel. With that clarification, Vamilo rose to his feet as though preparing to take his leave. Sean, unwilling to let the matter rest, stopped him and asked directly for Eve's location. His sudden request startled Lucard, who had been silent until then. Vamilo regarded Sean with an unreadable expression before shaking his head. He told Sean that he would encounter Eve when the right time arrived, and that he should not go seeking her prematurely. Leaving those cryptic words behind, Vamilo exited the room, leaving Sean with the heavy sense that he had just been denied something crucial. Moments later, Lucard returned, carrying a dish with pride. He placed it before Sean and announced that it was his special creation, Lucard's special dish, prepared in honor of someone who claimed acquaintance with Lady Eve. His jovial tone filled the room, but almost immediately an unusual aura pressed down upon the space, heavy and suffocating, making Sean tense in his seat. As Sean began to eat, Lucard curiously asked how he knew Eve. He even teased the idea that Sean might be her lover. Sean flushed at the suggestion, quickly dismissing it as nonsense. In turn, he asked Lucard what connection he had to Eve. To his surprise, Lucard revealed that he was the president of the Papa Bear Club, a group devoted entirely to protecting Lady Eve. Sean grimaced at the explanation, but Lucard assured him there was nothing suspicious about the group. Their sole purpose was to shield Eve Lugel, since her presence alone inspired many yet attracted dangerous stalkers as well. According to Lucard, the Papa Bear Club had dealt with countless such threats. Lucard's admiration spilled endlessly as he praised Eve's beauty and grace, speaking as if he could never exhaust the subject. Sean could only think to himself that Lucard was essentially just the leader of her fan club. This understanding explained clearly why Eve would need the disguise item to move unnoticed. Lucard rambled further, discussing Eve's upcoming coming-of-age ceremony, known as the Ceremony of the Crimson Wind. He was certain Eve would participate, and Sean would likely be there as well. That thought lingered in Sean's mind, raising the question of whether their reunion would make them allies or enemies. Eventually Lucard asked Sean if he wished to join the fan club. He even offered to write him a recommendation. Sean declined firmly, saying he had no reason to join. Lucard's expression soured immediately, his earlier excitement turning into disappointment. He muttered that he had misjudged Sean, regretting that he had shared his special dish with someone who lacked loyalty. He grumbled that young people no longer understood devotion. Sean remained calm. He told himself that his path did not need to change because of Eve. What mattered now was strength. He had to become stronger, whether to prepare for a confrontation with Eve or to prevent another calamity from unfolding. He reassured Lucard that he was not without loyalty, but his relationship with Eve was uncertain at best. Sean then mentioned a man named Chero, saying that Chero claimed to know him, and asked whether Lucard had heard of him. At the sound of that name, Lucard's composure shattered. His face twisted with anger as he demanded to know where Chero was hiding. He explained that Chero owed him a bar tab so large it was worth the value of an entire house. To make matters worse, Chero had scammed him with a fraudulent contract. Sean tried to calm him, but Lucard's outrage would not subside. He promised to reward Sean generously if he helped him capture Chero. At that moment, the system intervened. A new quest appeared before Sean, instructing him to capture Chero. He hesitated, weighing his options, but Lucard insisted that the reward would be worth it. Curious, Sean asked exactly how much Lucard considered a handsome reward. Lucard faltered, unable to produce an answer. Sean turned away, complaining that he had been underappreciated, and prepared to leave. In desperation, Lucard shouted that he would give him his gauntlet as the reward. That was precisely what Sean had hoped for. He immediately accepted the mission, stating that he would begin the hunt for Chero in the morning. Before he left, he told Lucard to polish the gauntlet properly, leaving Lucard overwhelmed and confused at the sudden turn of events. Within this world, the concept of the fate card was known by many different names. Some called it the God's card, others the cursed card, while still others referred to it as the card of the cosmos. Regardless of name, each was a unique expression of the power granted exclusively to players. By encountering Chero, who was known as a card captor, a player could unlock the promotion function of the fate card. This was a vital step, as it allowed useless cards to be converted into stronger versions, raising their rank. For Sean, this meant an opportunity he could not ignore. Though Chero was infamous as a skilled scammer, the chance to meet him was crucial. Sean needed to transform his lowly D rank cards into C rank cards through the card promotion system. As he ascended the stairs later that evening, he clenched his fists in determination. He declared silently to himself that he would grow stronger, casting aside his humiliating F-rank slave title once and for all.